Chapter 46 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 46. O, life, thou art a galling load, along a rough, a weary road, to wretches such as I. The crisis has come, she tells herself, with a rather grim smile. Well, better have it and get it over. That there had been a violent scene between Baltimore and his wife after dinner had somehow become known to her, and the marks of it still betrayed themselves in the former's frowning brow and sombre eyes. It had been more of a scene than usual. Lady Baltimore, generally so calm, had for once lost herself, and given way to a passion of indignation that had shaken her to her very heart's core. Though so apparently unmoved and almost insolent in her demeanour toward Lady Swansdown during their interview, she had been, nevertheless, cruelly wounded by it, and could not forgive Baltimore in that he had been its cause. As for him, he could not forgive her all she had said and looked. With a heart on fire he had sought Lady Swansdown, the one woman who he knew understood and believed in him. It was a perilous moment, and Beatrice knew it. She knew, too, that angry despair was driving him into her arms, not honest affection. She was strong enough to face this and refuse to deceive herself about it. "I didn't think you and Beauclerk had anything in common," said Baltimore, seating himself beside her on the low lounge that is half hidden from the public gaze by the Indian curtains that fall at each side of it. He had made no pretence of finishing the dance. He had led the way, and she had suffered herself to be led into the small anteroom that, half smothered in early spring flowers, lay off the dancing room. "Ah, you see you have yet much to learn about me," says she, with an attempt at gaiety, that fails, however. "About you? No," says he, almost defiantly. "Don't tell me I have deceived myself about you, Beatrice. You are all I have left to fall back upon now." His tone is reckless to the last degree. "A forlorn pis-aller," says she, steadily, with a forced smile. "What is it, Cyril?" looking at him with sudden intentness. "Something has happened. What?" "The old story," returns he, "and I am sick of it. I have thrown up my hand. I would have been faithful to her, Beatrice, I swear that, but she does not care for my devotion, and as for me now—" He throws out his arms as if tired to death, and draws in his breath heavily. "Now?" says she, leaning forward. "Am I worth your acceptance?" says he, turning sharply to her. "I hardly dare to think, and yet you have been kind to me, and your own lot is not altogether a happy one, and—" He pauses. "Do you hesitate?" asks she very bitterly, although her pale lips are smiling. "Will you risk it all?" says he, sadly. "Will you come away with me? I feel I have no friend on earth but you. Will you take pity on me? I shall not stay here, whatever happens. I have striven against fate too long. It has overcome me. Another land, a different life, complete forgetfulness." "Do you know what you are saying?" asks Lady Swansdown, who has grown deadly white. "Yes, I have thought it all out. It is for you now to decide. I have sometimes thought I was not entirely indifferent to you, and at all events we are friends in the best sense of the term. If you were a happy married woman, Beatrice, I should not speak to you like this, but as it is, in another land, if you will come with me, Think, says she, putting up her hand to stay him from further speech. All this is said in a moment of angry excitement. You have called me your friend, and truly, I am so far in touch with you that I can see you are very unhappy. You have had, forgive me if I probe you, but you have had some words with your wife? Final words, I hope, I think. I do not, however, all this will blow over, and, come, Cyril, face it. Are you really prepared to deliberately break the last link that holds you to her? There is no link. She has cut herself adrift long since. She will be glad to be rid of me. And you? Will you be glad to be rid of her? It will be better, says he shortly. And the boy? Don't let us go into it, says he a little wildly. Oh, but we must, says she. The boy, you will. I shall leave him to her. It is all she has. I am nothing to her. I cannot leave her desolate. How you consider her, says she, in a choking voice. She could have burst into tears. What a heart! And that woman to treat him so, whilst, oh, it is hard. I tell you, says she presently, that you have not gone into this thing. Tomorrow you will regret all that you have now said. If you refuse me, yes, it lies in your hands now. Are you going to refuse me? Give me a moment, says she faintly. She has risen to her feet, and is so standing that he cannot watch her. Her whole soul is convulsed. Shall she not? The scales are trembling. That woman's face, how it rises before her now, pale, cold, contemptuous. With what an insolent air she had almost ordered her from her sight. And yet, she can remember that disdainful face, kind and tender and loving, a face she had once delighted to dwell upon, and Isabel had been very good to her once, when others had not been kind, and when Swansdown, her natural protector, had been scandalously untrue to his trust. Isabel had loved her then, and now how was she about to requite her? Was she to let her know her to be false, not only in thought but in reality? Could she live and see that pale face in imagination filled with scorn for the desecrated friendship that once had been a real bond between them? Oh, a groan that is almost a sob breaks from her. The scale has gone down to one side. It is all over. Hope and love and joy. Isabel has won. She has been leaning against the arm of the lounge. Now she once more sinks back upon the seat, as though standing is impossible to her. Well, says Baltimore, laying his hand gently upon hers. His touch seems to burn her. She flings his hand from her and shrinks back. You have decided, says he quickly. You will not come with me. Oh, no, cries she. It is impossible. A little curious laugh breaks from her that is cruelly akin to a cry. There is too much to remember, says she suddenly. You think you would be wronging her, says Baltimore, reading her correctly. I have told you, you are at fault there. She would bless the chance that swept me out of her life, and as for me, I should have no regrets. You need not fear that." "Ah, that is what I do fear," says she in a low tone. "Well, you have decided," says he after a pause. "After all, why should I feel either disappointment or surprise? What is there about me that should tempt any woman to cast in her lot with mine?" "Much," said Lady Swansdown deliberately, "but the one great essential is wanting. You have no love to give. It is all given." She leans toward him and regards him earnestly. "Do you really think you are in love with me? Shall I tell you who you are in love with?" She lets her soft cheek fall into her hand, and looks up at him from under her long lashes. "You can tell me what you will," says he, a little impatiently. "Listen, then," says she, with a rather broken attempt at gaiety. "You are in love with that good, charming, irritating, impossible, but most lovable person in the world, your own wife." "Pshaw!" says Baltimore, with an irritated gesture. "We will not discuss her, if you please." "As you will. To discuss her or leave her name out of it altogether will not, however, alter matters." "You have quite made up your mind," says he presently, looking at her searchingly. "You will let me go alone into evil?" "You will not go," returns she, trying to speak with conviction, but looking very anxious. "I certainly shall. There is nothing else left for me to do. Life here is intolerable." "There is one thing," says she, her voice trembling. "You might make it up with her." "Do you think I haven't tried?" says he with a harsh laugh. "I'm tired of making advances. I have done all that a man can do. No, I shall not try again. My one regret in leaving England will be that I shall not see you again." "Don't," says she hoarsely. "I believe on my soul," says he hurriedly, "that you do care for me, that it is only because of her that you will not listen to me." "You are right," in a low tone. Her voice fails her. She presses her hands together. "Confess," says she with a terrible abandonment, "that I might have listened to you, had I not liked her so well." "Better than me, apparently," says he bitterly. "She has had the best of it all, though." "We are quits, then," says she quite as bitterly, "because you like her better than me." "If so, do you think I would speak to you as I have spoken?" "Yes, I think that. A man is always more or less of a baby. Years of discretion he seldom reaches. You are angry with your wife, and would be revenged upon her, and your way to revenge yourself is to make a second woman hate you." "A second? I should probably hate you in 6 months," says she with a touch of passion. "I am not sure that I do not hate you now." Her nerve is fast failing her. If she had a doubt about it before, the certainty now that Baltimore's feeling for her is merely friendship, the desire of a lonely man for some sympathetic companion, anything but love, has entered into her and crushed her. He would devote the rest of his life to her. She is sure of that. But always it would be a life filled with an unavailing regret. A horror of the whole situation has seized upon her. She will never be any more to him than a pleasant memory, while he to her must be an ever-growing pain. Oh, to be able to wrench herself free, to be able to forget him, to blot him out of her mind for ever. A second woman! Repeats he, as if struck by this thought to the exclusion of all others. Yes. You think then, gazing at her, that she hates me? Lady Swansdown breaks into a low but mirthless laugh. The most poignant anguish rings through it. She, cries she, as if unable to control herself, and then stops suddenly, placing her hand to her forehead. Oh no, she doesn't hate you, says she, but how you betray yourself! Do you wonder I laugh? Did ever any man so give himself away? You have been declaring to me for months that she hates you. Yet when I put it into words, or you think I do, seems as though some fresh new evil had befallen you. Ah, give up this role of Don Juan, Baltimore. It doesn't suit you. I have had no desire to play the part, says he with a frown. No, and yet you ask a woman, for whom you scarcely bear a passing affection, to run away with you, to defy public opinion for your sake, and so forth. You should advise her to count the world well lost for love. Such love as yours. You pour every bit of the old rubbish into one's ears, and yet— She stops abruptly. A very storm of anger and grief and despair is shaking her to her heart's core. Well, says he, still frowning, what have you to offer me in exchange for all you ask me to give? A heart filled with thoughts of another, no more. If you persist in thinking, why should I not think it? When I tell you there is danger of me hating you, as your wife might, perhaps, hate you, your first thought is for her. You think then that she hates me? She imitates the anxiety of his tone with angry truthfulness. Not one word of horror at the thought that I might hate you 6 months hence. Perhaps I did not believe you would, says he with some embarrassment. Ah, that is so like a man. You think, don't you, that you were made to be loved? There, go, leave me. He would have spoken to her again, but she rejects the idea with such bitterness that he is necessarily silent. She has covered her face with her hands. Presently she is alone. End of chapter 46. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter number 47 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 47. But there are griefs, griefs as deep, the friendship turned to hate, and deeper still, repentance come too late, too late. Joyce, on the whole, had not enjoyed last night's dance at the court. Barbara had been there, and she had gone home with her and Monkton after it, and on waking this morning a sense of unreality, of dissatisfaction, is all that comes to her. No pleasant flavour is on her mental palate. There is only a vague feeling of failure and a dislike to looking into things, to analyze matters as they stand. Yet where the failure came in she would have found it difficult to explain even to herself. Everybody, so far as she was concerned, had behaved perfectly, that is, as she if she had been compelled to say it out loud, would have desired them to behave. Mr. Beauclerk had been polite enough, not too polite, and Lady Baltimore had made a great deal of her, and Barbara had said she looked lovely, and Freddie had said something, absurd of course, and not worth repeating, but still flattering, and those men from the barracks at Clonbee had been a perfect nuisance. They were so pressing with their horrid attentions, and so eager to get a dance, and Mr. Dysart, well, that fault could not be laid to his charge, therefore, of course, he was all that could be desired. He was circumspect to the last degree. He had not been pressing with his attentions. He had, indeed, been so kind and nice that he had only asked her for one dance, and during the short quarter of an hour that took to get through he had been so admirably conducted as to restrain his conversation to the most commonplace, and had not suggested that the conservatory was a capital place to get cool in between the dances. The comb she was doing her hair with at the time caught in her hair as she came to this point, and she flung it angrily from her, and assured herself that the tears that had suddenly come into her eyes arose from the pain that hateful instrument of torture had caused her. Yes, Felix had taken the right course. He had at least learned that she could never be anything to him, could never forgive him. It showed great dignity in him, great strength of mind. She had told him, at least given him to understand when in London, that he should forget her, and he had forgotten. He had obeyed her. The comb must have hurt her again, and worse this time, because now the tears are running down her cheeks. How horrible it is to be unforgiving. People who don't forgive never go to heaven. There seems to be some sort of vicious consolation in this thought. In truth, Dysart's behaviour to her since his return has been all she had led him to understand it ought to be. He is so changed toward her in every way that sometimes she has wondered if he has forgotten all the strange, unhappy past, and now entirely emancipated from the torture of love unrequited that once had been his. It is a train of thought she has up to this shrank from pursuing, yet which, she being strong in certain ways, should have been pursued by her to the bitter end. One small fact, however, has rendered her doubtful. She could not fail to notice that whenever he and she are together in the morning-room, ball-room, or at luncheon or dinner, or breakfast, though he will not approach or voluntarily address her until she first makes an advance toward him, a rare occurrence, still, if she raises her eyes to his, anywhere, at any moment, it is to find his on her. And what sad eyes! Searching, longing, despairing, angry, but always full of an indescribable tenderness. Last night she had specially noticed this, but then last night he had specially held aloof from her. No, it was no use dwelling upon it. He would not forgive. That chapter in her life was closed. To attempt to open it again would be to court defeat. Joyce, however, had not been the only one to whom last night had been a disappointment. Beauclerk's determination to propose to her, to put his fortune to the touch and to gain hers, failed. Either the fates were against him, or else she herself was in a wilful mood. She had refused to leave the dancing-room with him on any pretext whatever, unless to gain the coolness of the crowded hall outside, or the still more inhabited supper-room. He was not dismayed, however, and there was no need to do things precipitately. There was plenty of time. There could be no doubt about the fact that she preferred him to any of the other men of her acquaintance. He had discovered that she had refused Dysart not only once, but twice. This he had drawn out of Isabel by a mild and apparently meaningless, but nevertheless incessant and abstruse cross-examination. Naturally, he could see at once the reasons for that. No girl who had been once honored by his attentions could possibly give her heart to another. No girl ever yet refused an honest offer unless her mind was filled with the image of another fellow. Mr. Beauclerk found no difficulty about placing the other fellow. In this case, Norman Beauclerk was his name. What woman in her senses would prefer that tiresome Dysart with his downright honesty business so gloomily developed to him Beauclerk? Answer: no one. Well, she shall be rewarded now, dear little girl. He will make her happy for life by laying his name and prospective fortune at her feet. To-day he will end his happy bachelor state and sacrifice himself on the altar of love. Thus resolved, he walks through the lands of the court, through the valley filled with opening fronds of ferns, and through the spinney beyond that again, until he comes to where the Monktons live. The house seems very silent. Knocking at the door, the maid comes to tell him that Mr. and Mrs. Monkton and the children are out, but that Miss Kavanagh is within. Happy circumstance! Surely the fates favour him. They always have, by the by, sure sign that he is deserving of good luck. Thanks, Miss Kavanagh, then, his compliments, and hopes that she is not too fatigued to receive him. The maid, having shown him into the drawing-room, retires with the message, and presently the sound of little high-heeled shoes crossing the hall tells him that Joyce is approaching. His heart beats high, not inordinately high. To be uncertain is to be none the less unnerved. But there is no uncertainty about his wooing. Still it pleases him to know that in spite of her fatigue she could not bring herself to deny herself to him. "Ah, how good of you," says he as she enters, meeting her with both hands outstretched. "I feared the visit was too early. A very bêtise on my part. But you are the soul of kindness always." "Early?" says Joyce, with a little laugh. "Why, you might have found me chasing the children round the garden 3 hours ago." Providently giving him one hand, the ordinary one, and ignoring his other, "their father and mother were bound to go to Tisdown this morning, or I should have been dead long before this." "Ah!" said Beauclerk, and then with increasing tenderness, "so glad they were removed. It would have been too much for you, wouldn't it?" "Yes, I dare say, on the whole, I believe I don't mind them," says Miss Kavanagh. "Well, and what about last night? It was delightful, wasn't it?" Secretly she sighs heavily as she makes this most untruthful assertion. "Ah, was it?" asks he. "I did not find it so. How could I when you were so unkind to me?" "I? Oh, no. Oh, surely not," says she anxiously. There is no touch of the coquetry that might be about this answer, had it been given to a man better liked. A slow, soft colour has crept into her cheeks, born of the knowledge that she had got out of several dances with him, but he, seeing it, gives it another, a more flattering meaning to his own self-love. "Can you deny it?" asks he, changing his seat as to get nearer to her. "Joyce," he leans towards her, "may I speak at last? Last night I was foiled in my purpose. It is difficult to say all that is in one's heart at a public affair of that kind, but now, Miss Kavanagh has sprung to her feet. "No, don't, she says earnestly. "I tell you, I beg you, I warn you." She pauses as if not knowing what else to say, and raises her pretty hands as if to enforce her words. "Shy, delightfully shy," says Beauclerk to himself. He goes quickly up to her with all the noble air of the conqueror, and seizing one of her trembling hands, holds it in his own. "Hear me," he says with an amused toleration for her girlish mauvaise honte. "It is only such a little thing I have to say to you, but yet it means a great deal to me, and to you, I hope. I love you, Joyce. I have come here today to ask you to be my wife." "I told you not to speak," says she. She has grown very white now. "I warned you. It is no use, indeed." "I have startled you," says Beauclerk, still disbelieving, yet somehow loosening the clasp on her hand. "You did not expect, perhaps, that I should have spoken to-day, and yet—" "No, it was not that," said Miss Kavanagh slowly. "I knew you would speak. I thought last night would have been the time, but I managed to avoid it then, and now—" "Well?" "I thought it better to get it over," says she gently. She stops as if struck by something, and heavy tears rush to her eyes. Ah, she had told another very much the same as that, but she had not meant it then, and yet had been believed, and now, when she does mean it, she is not believed. Oh, if the cases might be reversed! Beauclerk, however, mistakes the cause of tears. "Get what over?" demands he, smiling. "This misunderstanding." "Ah, yes, that. I am afraid." He leans more closely toward her. "I have often been afraid that you have not quite read me as I ought to be read." "Oh, I have read you," says she, with a little gesture of her head, half confused, half mournful, "but not rightly, perhaps. There have been moments when I fear you might have misjudged me." "Not one?" says she quickly. "Mr. Beauclerk, if I might implore you not to say another word." "Only one more," pleads he, coming up smiling as usual. "Just one, Joyce. Let me say my last word. It may make all the difference in the world between you and me. Now, I love you. Nay, hear me." She has risen, and he, rising too, takes possession of both her hands. "I have come here today to ask you to be my wife. You know that already, but you do not know how I have worshipped you all these dreary months, and how I have kept silent, for your sake." "And for my sake, why do you speak now?" asks she. She has withdrawn her hands from his. "What have you to offer me now that you had not a year ago?" After all, it is a great thing to be an accomplished liar. It sticks to Beauclerk now. "Why, haven't you heard?" asks he, lifting astonished brows. "I have heard nothing." "Not of my coming appointment, at least?" modestly. "Of my chance at it?" No, nothing, nothing, and even if I had it would make no difference. I beg you to understand once for all, Mr. Beauclerk, that I cannot listen to you. Not now, perhaps. I have been very sudden. No, never, never. Are you telling me that you refuse me? Asked he, looking at her with a rather strange expression in his eyes. I am sorry you put it that way, returned she faintly. I don't believe you know what you are doing, cries he, losing his self-control for once in his life. You will regret this. For a moment of spite, of ill-temper, you— Why should I be ill-tempered about anything that concerns you and me? Says she, very gently still. She has grown even whiter, however, and has lifted her head so that her large eyes are directed straight to his. Something in the calm severity of her look chills him. Ah, you know best, says he, viciously. The game is up, is thoroughly played out. This he acknowledges to himself, and the knowledge does not help to sweeten his temper. It helps him, however, to direct a last shaft at her. Taking up his hat, he makes a movement to depart, and then looks back at her. His overweening vanity is still alive. When you do regret it, says he, and I believe that will be soon, it will be too late. You had the goodness to give me a warning a few minutes ago. I give you one now. I shall not regret it, says she coolly. Not even when Dysart has sailed for India, and then the girl he left behind him is disconsolate, asks he, with an insolent laugh. Ha! That touches you. It had touched her. She looks like a living thing stricken suddenly into marble, as she stands gazing back at him, with her hands tightly clenched before her. India! To India! And she never had heard. Extreme anger, however, fights with her grief, and overcoming it, enables her to answer her adversary. I think you, too, will feel regret, says she gravely, when you look back upon your conduct to me today. There is such gentleness, such dignity in her rebuke, and her beautiful face is so full of mute reproach, that all the good there is in Beauclerk rises to the surface. He flings his hat upon a table near, and himself at her feet. Forgive me, cries he, in a stifled tone. Have mercy on me, Joyce. I love you, I swear it. Do not cast me adrift. All I have said or done I regret now. You said I should regret, and I do. Something in his abasement disgusts the girl. Instead of creating pity in her breast, she shakes herself free of him by a sharp and horrified movement. You must go home, she says calmly, yet with a frowning brow, and you must not come here again. I told you it was all useless, but you would not listen. No, no, not a word. He has risen to his feet, and would have advanced toward her, but she waves him from her with a sort of troubled hatred in her face. You mean, begins he hoarsely. One thing only, feverishly, that I hope I shall never see you again. End of chapter 47. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 48 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 48. When a man hath once forfeited the reputation of his sincerity, he is set fast, and nothing will then serve his turn, neither truth nor falsehood. When he is gone, Joyce draws a deep breath. For a moment it seems to her that it is all over, a disagreeable task performed, and then, suddenly, a reaction sets in. The scene gone through has tried her more than she knows, and without warning now she finds she is crying bitterly. How horrible it has all been! How detestable he had looked! Not so much when offering her his hand, as for his heart, pah! As when he had given way to his weak exhibition of feeling, and had knelt at her feet, throwing himself on her mercy. She placed her hands over her eyes when she thought of that. Oh, she wished he hadn't done it. She is still crying softly, not now for Beauclerk's behaviour, but for certain past beliefs, when a knock at the door warns her that another visitor is coming. She has not had time or sufficient presence of mind to tell the servant that she is not at home, when Miss Maliphant is ushered in by the parlour maid. "I thought I'd come down and have a chat with you about last night," she begins in her usual loud tones, with an assumption of easiness that belied by the keen and searching glance she directs at Joyce. "I'm so glad," says Joyce, telling her little lie as bravely as she can, while trying to conceal her red eyelids from Miss Maliphant's astute gaze by pretending to rearrange a cushion that has fallen from one of the lounges. "Are you?" says her visitor dryly. "Seems to me I've come at the wrong moment. Shall I go away?" "Go? No," said Joyce, reddening and frowning a little. "Why should you?" "Well, you've been crying," said Miss Maliphant, in her terribly downright way. "I hate people when I've been crying, but then it makes me a fright, and it only makes you a little less pretty. I suppose I mustn't ask what it is all about." "If you did, I don't believe I could tell you," says Joyce, laughing rather unsteadily. "I was merely thinking, and it is the simplest thing in the world to feel silly now and then." "Thinking? Of Mr. Beauclerk?" asked Miss Maliphant promptly, and without the slightest idea of hesitation. "I saw him leaving this as I came by the upper road. Was it he who made you cry?" "Certainly not," said Joyce indignantly. "It looks like, however," says the other, her masculine voice growing even sterner. "What was he saying to you?" "I really do think," Joyce is beginning coldly when Miss Maliphant stops her by an imperative gesture. "Oh, I know all about that," says she, contemptuously. "One shouldn't ask questions about other people's affairs. I've learned my manners, though I seldom make any use of my knowledge, I admit. After all, I see no reason why I shouldn't ask you that question. I want to know, and there is no one to tell me but you. Was he proposing to you, eh?" "Why should you think that?" asked Joyce, subdued by the masterful manner of the other, and by something honest and above board about her that is her chief characteristic. There is no suspicion either about her of her questions being prompted by mere idle curiosity. She has said she wants to know, and there was meaning in her tone. "Why shouldn't I?" says she now. "He came down here early this afternoon. He goes away in haste, and I find you in tears. Everything points one way." "I don't see why it should point in that direction." "Come, be open with me," says the heiress, brusquely, in an abrupt fashion that still fails to offend. "Did he propose to you?" Joyce hesitates. She raises her head and looks at Miss Maliphant earnestly, What a good face she has, if plain, too good to be made unhappy. After all, why not tell her the truth? It would be a warning. It was impossible to be blind to the fact that Miss Maliphant had been glad to receive the dishonest attentions paid to her every now and then by Beauclerk. Those attentions would probably be increased now, and would end but one way. He would get Miss Maliphant's money, and she, the good kind-hearted girl, what would she get? It seems cruel to be silent, and yet to speak is difficult. Would it be fair or honourable to divulge his secret? Would it be fair or honourable to let her imagine what is not true? He had been false to her, Joyce. She could not blind herself to the knowledge that with all his affected desire for her, he would never have made her an offer of his hand but for her having come in for that money. He would therefore be false to Miss Maliphant. He would marry her undoubtedly, but as a husband he would break her heart. Is she, for the sake of a word or two, to see her fall a prey to a mere passionless fortune-hunter? 1,000 times no. Better inflict a little pain now, rather than let this girl endure endless pain in the future. With a shrinking at her heart, born of the fear that the word will be very bitter to her guest, she says, "Yes," very distinctively. "Ha!" says Miss Maliphant, and that is all. Joyce, regarding her anxiously, is as relieved as astonished to see no trace of grief or chagrin upon her face. There is no change at all, indeed, except she looks deeply reflective. Her mind seems to be travelling backward, picking up loose threads of memory, no doubt, and joining them together. A scene of intense comfort fills Joyce's soul. After all, the wound has not gone deep. She has been right to speak. "He is not worth thinking about," says she, tremulously, apropos of nothing, as it seems. "No?" said Miss Maliphant. "Then what were you crying about?" "I hardly know. I feel nervous. And once I did like him. Not very much, but still I liked him, and he was a disappointment." "Tell you what," said Miss Maliphant, "you've hit upon a big truth. He is not worth thinking about. Once, perhaps, I too liked him, and I was an idiot for my pains. But I shan't like him again in a hurry. I expect I've got to let him know that, one way or another. And as for you—" "I tell you I never liked him much," says Joyce, with a touch of displeasure. "He was handsome, suave, agreeable, but—" "He was and is a hypocrite," interrupts Miss Maliphant, with truly beautiful conciseness. She has never learned to mince matters, and when all is told perhaps nothing better than a fool. You are well out of it, in my opinion." "I don't think I had much to do with it," says Joyce, unable to refrain from a smile. "I fancy my poor uncle was responsible for the honour done me to-day." Then a sort of vague feeling that she is being ungenerous distresses her. "Perhaps, after all, I misjudge him too far," she says. "Could you?" with a bitter little laugh. "I don't know," doubtfully. "One often forms an opinion of a person, and though the groundwork of it may be just, still one is too inclined to build upon it and to rear stories upon it that get a little beyond the actual truth when the structure is completed." "Oh, I think it is he who tells all the stories," says Miss Maliphant, who is singularly dull in little unnecessary ways, and has failed to follow Joyce in her upstairs flight. "In my opinion he's a liar. I was going to say pur et simple, but he is neither pure nor simple. A liar, says Joyce, as if shocked. Some old thought recurs to her. She turns quickly to Miss Maliphant. The thought grows into words almost before she is aware of it. "Have you a cousin in India?" asks she. "In India?" Miss Maliphant regards her with some surprise. Why this sudden absurd question is an interesting conversation about that. Judas? I regret to say this is what Miss Maliphant has now decided upon naming Mr. Beauclerk when talking to herself. Yes, India. No one. Plenty in Manchester and Birmingham, but no one in India. Joyce leans back in her chair, and strange laugh breaks out from her. She gets up suddenly and goes to the other and leans over her, as though the better to see her. "Oh, think, says she. "Not a cousin you loved, dearly loved? A cousin for whom you were breaking your heart, who was not as steady as he ought to be, but who—" "You must be going out of your mind," said Miss Maliphant, drawing back from her. "If you saw my Birmingham cousins, or even the Manchester ones, you wouldn't ask that question twice. They think of nothing but money, 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 from morning till night, and are essentially shoppy. I don't mind saying it, you know. It is as good to give up and acknowledge things, and certainly they— Never mind, then. It is the Indian cousin in whom I am interested," says Joyce impatiently. "You are sure that you haven't one out there? One whom Mr. Beauclerk knew about? And who was in love with you, and you with him? The cousin he told me of—" "Mr. Beauclerk?" Yes. The night of the ball at the court, last autumn. I saw you with Mr. Beauclerk in the garden then, and he told me afterward you had been confiding in him about your cousin, the one in India, that you were going to be married to him. Oh, there must be truth, some truth in it. Do try to think." "If," says Miss Maliphant slowly, "I were to think until I was black in the face, as black as any Indian of 'em all, I couldn't even by so severe a process conjure up a cousin in Hindostan. And so he told you that?" "Yes," says Joyce faintly. She feels almost physically ill. "He's positively unique," said Miss Maliphant, after a slight pause. "I told you just now that he was a liar, but I didn't throw sufficient enthusiasm into the assertion. He is a liar of distinction very far above his fellows. I suppose it would be superfluous now to ask if that night you speak of you were engaged to Mr. Dysart?" "Oh, no," says Joyce quickly, as if struck. "There never has been, there never will aught of that sort between me and Mr. Dysart. Surely, Mr. Beauclerk did not—" "Oh, yes, he did. He assured me, not in so many words, let me be perfectly just to him, but he positively gave me to understand that you were going to marry Felix Dysart. There, don't mind that," seeing the girl's pained face. "He was bound to say something, you know, though it must be confessed the Indian cousin's story was the most ingenious. Why didn't you tell me of that before?" "Because he told it to me in the strictest confidence." "Of course. Bound you on your honour not to speak of it, lest my feelings should be hurt. Really, do you know, I think he was almost clever enough to make one sorry he didn't succeed. Well, good-bye." She rises abruptly, and taking Joyce's hand, looks at her for a moment. "Felix Dysart has a good heart," says she, suddenly. As suddenly she kisses Joyce, and crossing the room with a quick stride, leaves it. Chapter 48. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC.
Chapter 49 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jennifer Painter. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 49. Shall we not laugh? Shall we not weep? It is quite 4 o'clock, and therefore 2 hours later. Barbara has returned, and has learned the secret of Joyce's pale looks and sad eyes, and is now standing on the hearthrug, looking as one might who has been suddenly wakened from a dream that had seemed only too real. "And you mean to say, you really mean, Joyce, that you refused him?" "Yes, I actually had that much common sense," with a laugh that has something of bitterness in it. "But I was sure." "I know you thought he was my ideal of all things admirable, and you thought wrong." "But if not he—" "Barbara," says Joyce sharply, "was it not enough that you should have made one mistake? Must you insist on making another?" "Well, never mind," says Mrs. Monckton hastily. "I'm glad I made that one, at all events, and I'm only sorry you have felt it your duty to make your pretty eyes wet about it. Good gracious," looking out of the window, "who is coming now? Dicky Brown and Mr. Courtenay and those detestable Blakes. Tommy," turning sharply to her firstborn, "if you and Mabel stay here, you must be good. Do you hear now? Good. You are not to ask a single question or touch a thing in the room, and you are to keep Mabel quiet. I am not going to have Mrs. Blake go home and say you are the worst behaved children she ever met in her life. You will stay, Joyce?" anxiously to her sister. "Oh, I suppose so. I couldn't leave you to endure their tender mercies alone." "That's a darling girl. You know I never can get on with that odious woman. Ah, how d'ye do, Mrs. Blake? How sweet of you to come after last night's fatigue." "Well, I think a drive a capital thing after being up all night," says the newcomer, a fat, little, ill-natured woman, nestling herself into the cosiest chair in the room. "I hadn't quite meant to come here, but I met Mr. Brown and Mr. Courtenay, so I thought we might as well join forces and storm you in good earnest. Mr. Brown has just been telling me that Lady Swansdown left the court this morning. Got a telegram, she said, summoning her to Gloucestershire. Never do believe in these sudden telegrams myself. Stayed rather long in that ante-room with Lord Baltimore last night." "Didn't know she had been in any ante-room," says Mrs. Monckton coldly. "I dare say her mother-in-law is ill again. She has always been attentive to her." "Not on terms with her son, you know. So Lady Swansdown hopes, by the attention you speak of, to come in for the old lady's private fortune. Very considerable fortune, I've heard." "Who told you?" asked Mr. Brown, with a cruelly lively curiosity. "Lady Swansdown?" "Oh dear, no." Pause. Dicky still looking expectant, and Mrs. Blake uncomfortable. She is racking her brain to try and find some person who might have told her, but her brain fails her. The pause threatens to be ghastly, when Tommy comes to the rescue. He has been told off, as we know, to keep Mabel in a proper frame of mind, but being in a militant mood, has resented the task appointed him. He has indeed so far given in to the powers that be that he has consented to accept a picture book and to show it to Mabel, who is looking at it with him, lost in admiration of his remarkable powers of description. Each picture, indeed, is graphically explained by Tommy at the top of his lungs, and in extreme bad humour. He is lying on the rug, on his fat stomach and is becoming quite a martinet. "Look at this," he's saying now. "Look, do you hear? Oh, I won't stay and keep you good any longer. Here's a picture about a boat that's going to be drowned down in the sea in 1 minute. The name on it is," reading laboriously, "All hands to the pump," and, with considerable vicious enjoyment, it isn't a bit of good for them either. Here," pointing to the picture again with a stout forefinger, "here, they're all handsing at the pump, see?" "No, I don't, and I don't want to," says Mabel, whimpering and hiding her eyes. "Oh, I don't like it. It's a horrid picture. What's that man doing there in the corner?" peeping through her fingers at a dead man in the foreground. "He's dead. I know he is." "Of course he is," says Tommy, "and," valiantly, "I don't care a bit, I don't." "Oh, but I do," says Mabel. "And there's a lot of water, isn't there?" "There always is in the sea," says Tommy. "They'll all be drowned, I know they will," says Mabel, pushing away the book. "Oh, I hate handsing. Turn over, Tommy, do. It's a nasty, cruel, wicked picture." "Tommy, don't frighten Mabel," says his mother anxiously. "I'm not frightening her. I'm only keeping her quiet," says Tommy defiantly. "Ha, ha," says Mr. Courtenay vacuously. "How wonderfully unpleasant children can make themselves," says Mrs. Blake, making herself wonderfully unpleasant on the spot. "Your little boy so reminds me of my Reginald. He pulls his sister's hair merely for the fun of hearing her squeal." "Tommy does not pull Mabel's hair," says Barbara a little stiffly. "Tommy, come here to Mr. Brown. He wants to speak to you." "I want to know if you would like a cat," says Mr. Brown, drawing Tommy to him. "I don't want a cat like our cat," says Tommy promptly. "Ours is so small, and her tail is too thin. Lady Baltimore has a nice cat, with a tail like Mamma's furry for her neck." "Well, that's the very sort of cat I can get you if you wish." "But is the cat as big as her tail?" asks Tommy, still careful not to commit himself. "Well, perhaps not quite," says Mr. Brown gravely. "Must it be quite as big?" "I hate small cats," says Tommy. "I want a big one. I want—" pausing to find a suitable simile, and happily remembering the kennel outside, "a regular setter of a cat." "Ah," says Mr. Brown, "I expect I shall have to telegraph to India for a tiger for you." "A real live tiger?" asks Tommy, with distended eyes and a flutter of wild joy at his heart, the keener that some fear is mingled with it. "A tiger that eats people up?" "A man-eater," says Mr. Brown solemnly. "It would be the nearest approach I know to the animal you have described. As you won't have the cat that Lady Baltimore will give you, you must only try to put up with mine." "Poor Lady Baltimore," lisps Mrs. Blake. "What a great deal she has to endure." "Oh, she's all right to-day," returns Mr. Brown cheerfully. "Toothache any amount better this morning." Mrs. Blake laughs in a little mincing way. "How droll you are," says she. "Ah, if it were only toothache that was the matter, but—" Silence very effective, and a profound sigh. "Toothache's good enough for me," says Dicky. "I should never dream of asking for more." He glances here at Joyce, and continues sotto voce, "You look as if you had it." "No," returns she innocently. "Mine is neuralgia. A rather worse thing, after all." "Yes, you can get the tooth out," says he. "Have you heard," asks Mrs. Blake, "that Mr. Beauclerk is going to marry that hideous Miss Maliphant?" horrid Manchester person, don't you know. Can't think what Lady Baltimore sees in her. With a giggle, her want of beauty. Got rather too much of pretty women, I should say. I'm really afraid, says Dicky, that somebody has been hoaxing you this time, Mrs. Blake, genially. I happen to know for a fact that Miss Maliphant is not going to marry Beauclerk. Indeed? Snappishly. Well, really he is to be congratulated, I think. Perhaps, with a sharp glance at Joyce, I mistook the name of the young lady. I certainly heard he was going to be married. So am I, says Mr. Brown, some time or other. We're all going to get married one day or another. One day, indeed, is as good as another. You have set us such a capital example that we're safe to follow it. Mr. and Mrs. Blake being a notoriously unhappy couple, the latter grows rather red here, and Joyce gives Dicky a reproachful glance, which he returns with one of the wildest bewilderment. What can she mean? Mr. Dysart will be a distinct loss when he goes to India, continues Mrs. Blake quickly. Won't be back for years, I hear, and leaving so soon, too. A disappointment, I'm told. Some obdurate fair one, sort of chest affection, don't you know, ha-ha. India's place for that sort of thing. Knock it out of him in no time. Thought he looked rather down in the mouth last night. Not up to much lately, it has struck me. Seen much of him this time, Miss Kavanagh? Yes, a good deal, says Joyce, who has, however, paled perceptibly. Thought him rather gone to seed, eh? Rather the worse for wear. I think him always very agreeable, says Joyce icily. A second most uncomfortable silence ensues. Barbara tries to get up a conversation with Mr. Courtenay, but that person, never brilliant at any time, seems now stricken with dumbness. Into this awkward abyss Mabel plunges this time. Evidently she has been dwelling secretly on Tommy's comments on their own cat, and is therefore full of thought about that interesting animal. Our cat is going to have chickens, says she, with all the air of one who is imparting exciting intelligence. This astounding piece of natural history is received with varied emotions by the listeners. Mr. Brown, however, is unfeignedly charmed with it, and grows as enthusiastic about it as even Mabel can desire. You don't say so. When? Where? Demands he with breathless eagerness. Don't know, says Mabel seriously. Last time 'twas in Nurse's best bonnet, but, raising her sweet face to him, she says she'll be blowed if she has them there this time. Mabel! Cries her mother, crimson with mortification. Yes? Asked Mabel sweetly. But it is too much for everyone. Even Mrs. Blake gives way for once to honest mirth, and under cover of the laughter rises and takes her departure, rather glad of the excuse to get away. She carries off Mr. Courtenay. Dicky, having lingered a little while to see that Mabel isn't scolded, goes too, and Barbara, with a sense of relief, turns to Joyce. You look so awfully tired, says she. Why don't you go and lie down? I thought, on the contrary, I should like to go out for a walk, says Joyce indifferently. I confess my head is aching horribly, and that woman only made me worse. What a woman! I wonder she told so many lies. I wonder if Mr. Dysart is going to India, supplies Joyce calmly. Very likely. Why not? Most men in the army go to India. True, say Mrs. Monckton with a sigh. Then in a low tone, I shall be sorry for him. Why? If he goes, coldly, it is by his own desire. I see nothing to be sorry about. Oh, I do, says Barbara, and then, well, go out, dearest. The air will do you good. End of chapter 49.
Chapter number 50 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 50. 'Tis with our judgment as our watches, none go just alike, yet each believes his own. Lord Baltimore had not spoken in a mere fit or pique when he told Lady Swansdown of his fixed intention of putting a term to his present life. His last interview with his wife had quite decided him to throw up everything and seek forgetfulness in travel. Inclination had pointed toward such countries as Africa, or the northern parts of America, as, being a keen sportsman, he believed there he might find an occupation that would distract his mind from the thoughts that now jarred upon him incessantly. His asking Lady Swansdown to accompany him therefore had been a sudden determination. To go on a lengthened shooting expedition by oneself is one thing. To go with a woman delicately nurtured is another. Of course, had she agreed to his proposal, all his plans must necessarily have been altered, and perhaps his second feeling, after her refusal to go with them, was one of unmistakable relief. His proposal to her at least had been born of pique. The next morning found him, however, still strong in his desire for change. The desire was even so far stronger that he now burned to put it into execution, to get away to some fresh new sphere of action, and deliberately set himself to obliterate from his memory all past ties and recollections. There was, too, perhaps a touch of revenge that bordered upon pleasure as he thought of what his wife would say when she heard of his decision. She who shrank so delicately from gossip of all kinds could not fail to be distressed by news that must inevitably leave her and her private affairs open to public criticism. Though everybody was perpetually guessing about her domestic relations with her husband, no one as a matter of fact knew, except indeed two, quite the real truth about them. This would effectually open the eyes of society, and proclaim to everybody that, though she had refused to demand a separation, still she had been obliged to accept it. This would touch her. If in no other way could he get at her proud spirit, here now he would triumph. She had been anxious to get rid of him in a respectable way, of course, but death as usual had declined to step in when most wanted, and now, well, she must accept her release in however disreputable a guise it comes. It is just at the moment when Mrs. Blake is holding forth on Lady Baltimore's affairs to Mrs. Monkton that Baltimore enters the smaller drawing-room, where he knows he will be sure to meet his wife at this hour. It is far in the afternoon. Still the spring sunshine is streaming through the windows. Lady Baltimore, in a heavy tea-gown of pale green plush, is sitting by the fire reading a book, her little son upon the hearth rug beside her. The place is strewn with bricks, and the boy, as his father enters, looks up at him and calls to him eagerly to come and help him. At the sound of the child's quick, glad voice a pang contracts Baltimore's heart. The child, he had forgotten him. "I can't make this castle," says Bertie, "and mother isn't a bit of good. Hers always fall down. Come you and make me one." "Not now," says Baltimore. Not today. Run away to your nurse. I want to speak to your mother. There is something abrupt and jerky in his manner, something strained, and with sufficient temper in it to make the child cease from entreaty. The very pain Baltimore is feeling has made his manner harsher to the child, yet as the latter passes him obediently, he seizes the small figure in his arms and presses him convulsively to his breast. Then, putting him down, he points silently but peremptorily to the door. "Well?" says Lady Baltimore. She has risen, startled by his abrupt entrance, his tone, and more than all, by the last brief but passionate burst of affection toward the child. "You wish to speak to me again?" "There won't be many more opportunities," says he grimly. "You may safely give me a few moments today. I bring you good news. I am going abroad, at once, forever." In spite of the self-control she has taught herself, Lady Baltimore's self-possession gives way. Her brain seems to reel. Instinctively she grasps hold of the back of a tall prie-dieu next to her. "Ha! I thought so. I have touched her at last, through her pride," thinks Baltimore, watching her with a savage satisfaction, which, however, hurts him horribly. And after all, he was wrong, too. He had touched her, indeed, but it was her heart, not her pride, he had wounded. "Abroad?" echoes she faintly. "Yes, why not? I am sick of this sort of life. I have decided on flinging it up." "Since when have you come to this decision?" asks she presently, having conquered her sudden weakness by a supreme effort. "If you want day and date, I'm afraid I shan't be able to supply you. It has been growing upon me for some time, the idea of it, I mean, and last night you brought it to perfection." "I? Have you already forgotten all the complimentary speeches you made me? They," with a sardonic smile, "are so sweet to me that I shall keep them ripe in my memory until death overtakes me. And after it, I think, you told me among many other wifey things, if my mind does not deceive me, that you wished me well out of your life and Lady Swansdown with me." "That is a direct and most malicious misapplication of my words," says she, emphatically. "It is? I confess that was my reading of them. I accepted that version, and thinking to you a good turn, and relieve you both of your bête noire at once, I proposed to Lady Swansdown last night that she should accompany me upon my endless travels." There is a long, long pause, during which Lady Baltimore's face seems to have grown into marble. She takes a step forward now. Through the stern pallor of her skin her large eyes seem to gleam like fire. "How dare you?" she says in a voice very low, but so intense that it rings through the room. "How dare you tell me of this? Are you lost to all shame? You and she to go away together? It is only what I have been anticipating for months. I could see how it was with you, but that you should have the insolence to stand before me," she grows almost magnificent in her wrath, "and declare your infamy aloud. Such a thought was beyond me. There was a time when I would have thought it beyond you." "Was there?" says he. He laughs aloud. "There, says she with a rather wild sort of sigh. "Why should I waste a single emotion upon you? Let me take you calmly, casually. Come now." It is the saddest thing in the world to see how she treads down the passionate, most natural uprisings within her against the injustice of life. "Make me at least au courant with your movements. You and she will go where?" To the devil, you thought, didn't you? Says he. Well, you would be disappointed as far as she is concerned. I may be going. It appears she doesn't think it worth while to accompany me there or anywhere else. You mean that she refused to go with you? In the very baldest language, I assure you, it left nothing to be desired, believe me, in the matter of lucidity. No, she would not go with me. You see, there is not only one, but two women in the world who regard me as being utterly without charm. I commiserate you, says she with a bitter sneer, if, after all your attention to her, your friend has proved faithless. Don't waste your pity, says he, interrupting her rather rudely. On the whole, the decision of my friend, as you call her, was rather a relief to me than otherwise. I felt my duty to deprive you of her society, with an unpleasant laugh, and so I asked her to come with me. When she declined to accompany me, she left me free to devote myself to sport. Ah, you refuse to be corrupted, says she contemptuously. Think what you will, says he, restrained himself with determination. It doesn't matter in the least to me now. Your opinion I consider worthless, because prejudiced, as worthless as you consider me. I came here simply to tell you of my determination to go abroad. You have told me of that already. Lady Swansdown having failed you, may I ask, with studied contempt, who are you going to take with you now? What do you mean? Says he, wheeling round to her. What do you mean by that? By heavens! Laying his hands upon her shoulders, and looking with fierce eyes into her pale face, a man might well kill you. And why? Demands she undauntedly. You would have taken her. You have confessed so much. You have the coarse courage to put it in words. If not her, why? With a shrug. Then another. There, think as you will, says he, releasing her roughly. Nothing I could say would convince or move you, and yet I know it is no use, but I am determined. I will leave nothing unsaid. I will give you no loophole. I asked her to go with me in a moment of irritation, of loneliness, if you will. It is hard for a man to be forever outside the pale of affection, and I thought, well, it is a matter of what I thought. I was wrong, it seems. As for caring for her, I cared so little that I now feel actually glad she had the sense to refuse my senseless proposal. She would have bored me, I think, and I should undoubtedly have bored her. The proposition was made to her in a moment of folly. Oh, folly? She says with a curious laugh. Well, give it another name you like. After all, in a low tone, you are right. It was not the word. If I had said despair, I should have been nearer the mark. There even might be another word, she said slowly. Even if there were, says he, the occasion for it is of your making. You have thrown me. You must be prepared, therefore, to accept the consequences. You have prepared me for anything, says she calmly, but with a bitter meaning. See here, says he furiously, there may still be one thing left for you which I have not prepared. You have just asked me who I was going to take with me when I leave this place forever. Shall I answer you? Something in this manner terrifies her. She feels her face blanching. Words are denied her, but she makes a faint movement to assent with her hand. What is he going to say? What if I should decide then on taking my son with me? Says he violently. Who is there to prevent me? Not you or another. Thus I could cut all ties and put you out of my life at once and forever." He had certainly not calculated on the force of his words or his manner. It had been a mere angry suggestion. There was no crudity in Baltimore's nature. He had never once permitted himself to dwell upon the possibility of separating the boy from his mother. Such terrible revenge as that was beyond him. His whole nature would have revolted against it. He had spoken with passion, urged by her contempt into a desire to show her where his power lay, without any intention of actually using it. He meant perhaps to weaken her intolerable defiance, and show her where a hole in her armor lay. He was not prepared for the effect of his words. An ashen shade has overspread her face. Her expression has become ghostly. As though her limbs have suddenly given way under her, she falls against the mantelpiece and clings to it with trembling fingers. Her eyes, wild and anguished, seek his. "The child!" gasped she in a voice of mortal terror. "The child! Not the child! Oh, Baltimore, you have taken all from me except that. Leave my child!" "Good heavens! Don't look at me like that!" exclaims he, inexpressibly shocked. This sudden and complete abandonment of herself to her fear has horrified him. "I never meant it. I but suggested a possibility. The child shall stay with you. Do you hear me, Isabel? The child is yours. When I go alone." There is a moment's silence, and then she bursts into tears. It is a sharp reaction, and it shakes her bodily and mentally. A wild return of her love for him, that first, sweet, and only love of her life, returns to her, born of intense gratitude. But sadly, slowly, it dies away again. It seems to her too late to dream of that again. Yet perhaps her tears have as much to do with that lost love as with her gratitude. Slowly her color returns. She checks her sobs. She raises her head and looks at him, still with her handkerchief pressed to her tremulous lips. "It is a promise," says she. "Yes, a promise." "You will not change again?" nervously. "You, doubt to the last," says he. "It is a promise from me to you, and of course the word of such a reprobate as you consider me can scarcely be of any avail." "But you could not break this promise," says she in a low voice, and with a long, long sigh. "What trust you place in me?" said he, with an open sneer. "Well, so be it. I give you home and child. You give me not worth while going into the magnificence of your gifts, is it?" "I gave you once a whole heart, an unbroken faith," says she. "And you took them back again. Child's play," said he. "Child's promises. Well, if you will have it so, you will have got a promise from me now, and I think you might say thank you for it as children do." "I do thank you," says she vehemently. "Does not my whole manner speak for me?" Once again her eyes filled with tears. "So much love for the child," cries he in a stinging tone, "and not one thought for the father. True, your professions of love were light in thistledown. There, you are not worth a thought yourself. Expend any affection you have upon your son, and forget me as soon as ever you can. It will not take you long, once I am out of your sight." He strides towards the door, and then looks back at her. "You understand about my going," he says. "That it is decided, I mean." "As you will," says she, her glance on the ground. There is such a total lack of emotion in her whole air that it be suggested itself to an acute student of human nature that she is doing her very utmost to suppress even the smallest sign of it. But alas, Baltimore is not that student. "Be just," says he sternly. "It is as you will, not as I. It is you who are driving me into exile." He has turned his back, and has his hand on the handle of the door in the act of opening it. At this instant she makes a move toward him, holding out her hands, but as suddenly suppresses herself. When he turns again to say a last word, she is standing where he last saw her, pale and impassive as a statue. "There will be some matters to arrange," says he, "before my going. I have telegraphed to Hansard, his lawyer. He will be down in the morning. There will be a few papers for you to sign to-morrow." "Papers?" "My will and your maintenance while I'm away, and matters that will concern the child's future." "His future? That means—" "That in all probability when I have started I shall never see his face again, or yours." He opens the door abruptly and is gone. End of chapter 50. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 51 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 51. While bloomed the magic flowers we scarcely knew, the gold was there, but now their petals strew life's pathway. And yet the flowers were fair, fed by youth's dew and love's enchanted air. The cold evening air breathing on Joyce's flushed cheeks calms her as she sets out for the walk that Barbara had encouraged her to take. It is an evening of great beauty. Earth, sea, and sky seem blended in one great soft mist, that rising from the ocean down below floats up to heaven, its heart a pale, vague pink. The day is almost done, and already shadows are growing around trees and corners. There is something mystical and strange in the deep murmurs that come from the nestling woods. The sweet wild coo of the pigeons, the chirping of innumerable songsters, and now and then the dull hooting of some blinking owl. Through all, the sad tolling of a chapel bell away in the distance, where the tiny village hangs over the brow of the rocks that gird the sea. While yet the woods were hardly more than brown, filled with the stillness of the dying day, the folds and farms and faint green pastures lay, and bells chimed softly from the grey-walled town. The dark fields with the corn and poppy sown, the dull, delicious, dreamy forest way, the hope of April for the soul of May. On all of these nights wide, soft wings swept down. Well, it isn't night yet, however. She can see to tread her way along the short young grasses down to a favorite nook of hers, where musical sounds of running streams may be heard, and the rustling of growing leaves makes songs above one's head. Here and there she goes through brambly ways, where amorous arms from blackberry bushes strive to catch and hold her, and where star-eyed daisies and buttercups and delicate faint-hearted primroses peep out to laugh at her discomfiture. But she escapes from all their snares and goes on her way, her heart so full of troublous fancies that her many wiles gain from her not so much as one passing thought. The pretty, lovely May is just bursting into bloom. Its pink blossoms here and its white blossoms there mingle gloriously, and the perfume of it fills the silent air. Joyce picks a branch or two as she goes on her way, and thrusts them into the bosom of her gown. And now she has reached the outskirts of the wood, where the river runs, crossed by a rustic bridge, on which she has ever loved to rest and dream, leaning rounded arms upon the wooden railings, and seeing strange but sweet things in the bright, hurrying water beneath her eyes. She has gained the bridge now, and leaning languidly upon its frail ramparts, lets her gaze wander afield. The little stream, full of conversation as ever, flows on unnoticed by her. Its charms seem dead. That belonged to the old life, the life she will never know again. It seems to her quite a long time since she felt young, and yet only a few short months have flown since she was young as the best of them, when even Tommy did not seem altogether despicable as a companion, and she had often been guilty of finding pleasure in running a race with him, and of covering him not only with confusion, but with armfuls of scented hay, when at last she had gained the victory over him, and had turned from the appointed goal to overwhelm the enemy with merry sarcasms. Oh yes, that was all over, all done. An end must come to everything, and to her light-heartedness an end had come very soon. Too soon, she was inclined to believe, in an excess of self, until she remembered that life was always to be taken seriously, and she had deliberately trifled with it, seeing only the very heart of it, the gaiety, the carelessness, the ease. Well, her punishment has come. She has learned that life is a failure after all. It takes some people a lifetime to discover that great fact. It has taken her quite a short time. Nothing is of much consequence. And yet, she sighs and looks around her. Her eyes fall upon a distant bank of cloud overhanging a pretty farmstead, and throwing into bold relief the ricks of hay that stand at the western side of it. A huge black crow standing on top of this is napping his wings and calling loudly to his mate. Presently he spreads his wings, and with a creaking of them like the noise of a sail in a light wind, disappears over her head. She has followed his movements with a sort of lazy curiosity, and now she knows that he will return in an hour or so with thousands of his brethren, darkening the heavens as they pass to their night lodgings in the tall elm trees. It is good to be a bird. No care, no trouble, no pain. A short life and a merry one. Better than a long life and a sorry one. Yes, the world is all sorry. She turns her eyes impatiently away from the fast vanishing crow, and now they fall upon a perfect wilderness of daffodils that are growing upon the edge of the bank a little way down. How beautiful they are! Their soft, delicate heads nod lazily this way and that way. They seem the very embodiment of graceful drowsiness. Some lines lately read reoccur to her and awake within her memory. I wandered lonely as a cloud that floats on high o'er vales and hills, when all at once I saw a crowd of golden daffodils, beside the lake beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. They seemed so full of lazy joy, or unutterable rapture, that they belie her belief in the falseness of all things. They must surely be some good in the world that grows such charming things, things almost sentient, and the trees swaying above her head, and dropping their branches into the stream, is there no delight to be got out of them? The tenderness of this soft, sweet mood, in which perpetual twilight reigns, enters into her, and soothes the sad demon that is torturing her breast. Tears rise to her eyes. She leans still further over the parapet, and drawing the pink and white hawthorn blossoms from her bosom, drops them one by one into the hasty little river, and lets it bear them away upon its bosom to tiny bays unknown. Tears follow them, falling from her drooping lids. Can neither daffodils, nor birds, nor trees give her some little of their joy to chase the sorrow from her heart? Her soul seems to fling itself outward in an appeal to nature, and nature, that kind of mother of us all, responds to the unspoken cry. A step upon the bridge behind her. She starts in a more upright position, and looks round her without much interest. A dark figure is advancing towards her. Through the growing twilight it seems abnormally large and black, and Joyce stares at it anxiously. Not Freddy, not one of the labourers. They would all be clad in flannel jackets of a light colour. "Oh, is it you?" says Dysart, coming closer to her. He had, however, known it was she from the first moment his eyes rested upon her. No mist, no twilight could have deceived him, for lovers' eyes are sharp to see, and lovers' ears in hearing. "Yes," says she, advancing a little toward him and giving him her hand, a cold little hand and reluctant. "I was coming down to Mrs. Monkton with a message, a letter, from Lady Baltimore." "This is a very long way round from the court, isn't it?" says she. "Yes, but I like this calm little corner. I have come often to it lately." Miss Kavanagh lets her eyes wander to the stream down below, to this little spot of all places, her favourite nook. Had he hoped to meet her there? Oh, no, impossible. And besides, she had given it up for a long, long time, until this evening. It seems weeks to her now since last she was here. "You will find Barbara at home," says she gently. "I don't suppose it is of very much consequence," says he, alluding to the message. He is looking at her, though her averted face leaves him little to study. "You are cold," says he abruptly. "Am I?" turning to him with a little smile. "I don't feel cold. I feel dull, perhaps, but nothing else." And in truth, if she had used the word unhappy instead of dull, she would have been nearer the mark. The coming of Dysart thus suddenly into the midst of her mournful reverie has but served to accentuate the reality of it. A terrible sense of loneliness is oppressing her. All things have their place in this world, yet where is hers? On what account is she to anyone? Barbara loves her, yes, but not so well as Freddy and the children. Oh, to be first with someone! I find no spring, while spring is well nigh blown. I find no nest, while nests are in the grove. Woe's me for mine own heart that dwells alone, my heart that breaketh for a little love. Christina Rossetti's mournful words seem to suit her. Involuntarily she lifts her heavy eyes, tired of the day's weeping, and looks at Dysart. "You have been crying," says he abruptly. End of chapter 51. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter number 52 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 52. My love has sworn with sealing kiss, with me to live, to die. I have at last my nameless bliss, as I love, loved am I. There is a pause. It threatens to be an everlasting one, as Miss Kavanagh plainly doesn't know what to say. He can see this. What he cannot see is that she is afraid of her own voice. Those troublesome tears that all day have been so close to her seem closer than ever now. Beauclerk came down to see you to-day, says he presently. This remark is so unexpected that it steadies her. Yes, she says, calmly enough, but without raising the telltale eyes. You expected him? No, monosyllables only seem possible to her. So great is her fear that she will give way and finally disgrace herself, that she forgets to resent the magisterial tone B has adopted. He asked you to marry him, however. There is something almost threatening in his tone now, as if he is defying her to deny his assertion. It overwhelms her. Yes, she says again, and for the first time is struck by the wretched meagreness of her replies. Well, says Dysart roughly, but this time not even the desolate monosyllable rewards the keenness of his examination. Well, says he again, going closer to her and resting his hand on the wooden rail against which she, too, was leaning. He is so close to her now that it is impossible to escape his scrutiny. What am I to understand by that? Tell me how you have decided. Getting no answer to this either, he says impatiently, Tell me, Joyce. I refused him, says she at last in a low tone, and in a dull sort of way, as if the matter is one of indifference to her. Ah! He draws a long breath. Is it true? He says, laying his hand on hers as it lies on the top of the woodwork. Quite true. And yet, you have been crying? You can see that, says she penitently. You have taken pains to see and to tell me of it. Do you think it is a pleasant thing to be told? Most people, glancing angrily toward him, everyone, I think, makes it a point nowadays not to see when one has been making a fool of oneself, but you seem to take delight in torturing me. Did it? Says he bitterly, ignoring, perhaps not even hearing, her outburst. Did it cost you so much to refuse him? It cost me nothing, with a sudden effort, and a flash from her beautiful eyes. Nothing? I have said so. Nothing at all. It was mere nervousness, and because it reminded me of other things. Did he see you cry? Asked Dysart, tightening unconsciously his grasp upon her hand. No. He was gone a long time, quite a long time, before it occurred to me that I should like to cry. I, with a frugal smile, indulged myself very freely then, as you have seen. Dysart draws a long breath of relief. It would have been intolerable to him that Beauclerk should have known of her tears. He would not have understood them. He would have taken possession of them, as it were. They would have merely helped to pamper his self-conceit and smooth down his ruffled pride. He would inevitably have placed such and such a construction on them, one entirely to his own glorification. I shall leave you now with a lighter heart, says Felix presently, now that I know you are not going to marry that fellow. You are going, then? says she sharply, checking the monotonous little tattoo she has been playing on the bridge rail, as though suddenly smitten into stone. She had heard he was going. She had been told of it by several people, but somehow she had never believed it. It had never come home to her until now. Yes, we are under orders for India. We sail in about a month. I shall have to leave here almost immediately. So soon? Says she, vaguely. She has begun that absurd tattoo again. But bridge, and restless little fingers, and sky and earth, all things seem blotted out. He is going, really going, and forever. How far is India away? It is always rather hurried at last. For my part, I am glad I am going. Yes? Mrs. Monkton will, at least I am sure she will, let me have a line now and then to let me know how you are all getting on. I was going to ask her about it this evening. You think she will be good enough? Barbara is always kind. I suppose, he hesitates and then goes on with an effort, I suppose it would be too much to ask of you. What? That you would sometimes write me a letter, however short? I'm a bad correspondent, says she, feeling as if she was choking. Ah, I see. I should not have asked, of course. Yes, you are right. It was absurd, my hoping for it. When people choose to go away so far as that, she is compelling herself to speak, but her voice sounds to herself a long way off. They must hope to be forgotten, out of sight, out of mind. I know it is such an old proverb. Well, you are cold, says he suddenly, noting the pallor of the girl's face. Whatever you were before, you are certainly chilled to the bone now. You look it. Come, this is no time of year to be lingering out of doors without a coat or hat. I have this shawl, says she, pointing to the soft white, fleecy thing that covers her. I distrust it. Come. No, she says faintly. Go on, you give your message to Barbara. As for me, I shall be happier here. Where I am not, says he with a bitter laugh. I suppose I ought to be accustomed to that thought now, but such is my conceit that it seems ever a fresh shock to me. Well, for all that, persuadingly, come in. The evening is very cold. I shan't like to go away, leaving you behind me suffering from a bad cough, or something of that kind. We have been friends, Joyce, with a rather sorry smile. For the sake of the old friendship, don't send me adrift with such anxiety on my mind. Would you really care? Says she. Ah, that is the humour of it, says he. In spite of it all, I should still really care. Come. He makes an effort to unclasp the small, pretty fingers that are grasping the rails so rigidly. At first they seem to resist his gentle pressure, and then they give way to him. She turns suddenly. Felix! Her voice is somewhat strained, somewhat harsh. Not all her own voice. Do you still love me? You know that, returns he, sadly. If he has felt any surprise at the question, he has not shown it. No, no, says she feverishly. That you like me, that you are fond of me, perhaps, I can still believe, but it is the same with you that it used to be. Do you, with a little sob, love me as well now as in those old days? Just the same? Not. Going near to him and laying her hand upon his breast, and raising agonized eyes of inquiry to his. Not one bit less? I love you 1,000 times more, says he, very quietly, but with such intensity that it enters into her very soul. Why? He has laid his own hand over the small nervous one lying on his breast, and his face has grown very white. Because I love you too. She stops here and begins to tremble violently. With a little shamed, heartbroken gesture, she tears her hand out of his and covers her face from his sight. Say that again, says he hoarsely. He waits a moment, but when no word comes from her he deliberately drags away the sheltering hands and compels her to look at him. Say it, says he in a tone that is now almost a command. Oh, it is true, true, cries she vehemently. I love you. I have loved you a long time, I think, but I didn't know. Oh, Felix, dear, dear Felix, forgive me. Forgive you, says he brokenly. Ah, yes, and don't leave me. If you go away from me, I shall die. There has been so much of it. A little more, and... She breaks down. My beloved, says he in a faint, quick way. He is holding her to him now with all his might. She can feel the quick pulsations of his heart. Suddenly she slips her soft arms around his neck, and now with her head pressed against his shoulder bursts into a storm of tears. It is a last shower. They are both silent for a long time, and then he, raising one of her hands, presses the palm against his lips. Looking up at him, she smiles, uncertainly but happy, a very rainbow of a smile, born of sunshine and raindrops gone. It seems to beautify her lips, but Felix, while acknowledging its charm, cannot smile back at her. It is all too strange, too new. He is afraid to believe, and yet there is something terrible to him in this happiness that has fallen into his life. You mean it? He asked, bending over her. If tomorrow I were to wake and find all this an idle dream, how would it be with me then? Say you mean it. Am I not here? Says she tremulously, making a slight but eloquent pressure on one of the arms that are around her. He bends his face to hers, and as he feels that first glad eager kiss returned, he knows. End of chapter 52. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 53 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 53. True love's the gift which God has given to man alone beneath the heaven. It is the secret sympathy, the silver link, the silken tie, which heart to heart and mind to mind, in body and in soul can bind. Of course Barbara is delighted. She proves charming as a confidante. Nothing can exceed the depth of her sympathy. When Joyce and Felix came in together in the darkening twilight, entering the house in burglarious fashion through the dining-room window, it so happens that Barbara is there, and is at once struck by the sense of guilt that seems to surround and envelop them. They had not, indeed, anticipated meeting Barbara in that room of all others, and are rather taken aback when they come face to face with her. I assure you we have not come after the spoons, says Felix in a would-be careless tone that could not have deceived an infant, and with a laugh so frightfully careless that it would have terrified the life out of you. You certainly don't look like it, says Mrs. Monkton, whose heart has begun to beat high with hope. She hardly knows whether it is better to fall upon their necks forthwith and declare she knows all about it, or else to pretend ignorance. She decides upon the latter as being the easier. After all, they mightn't like the neck process. Most people have a fancy for telling their own tales. To have them told for one is annoying. You haven't the requisite murderous expression, she says, unable to resist a touch of satire. You look rather frightened, you two. What have you been doing? She is too good-natured not to give them an opening for their confession. Not much, and yet a great deal, says Felix. He has advanced a little, while Joyce, on the contrary, has meanly receded farther into the background. She has rather the appearance, indeed, of one who, if the wall could have been induced to give way, would gladly have followed it into the garden. The wall, however, declines to budge. As for burglary, goes on Felix, trying to be gay, and succeeding villainously, you must exonerate your sister at all events, but I confess I have stolen something belonging to you. Oh no, not stolen, says Joyce in a rather faint tone. Barbara, I know what you will think, but I know what I do think, cries Barbara joyously. Oh, is it? Can it be true? It never occurs to her that Felix is now not altogether as brilliant match for her sister with a fortune. She remembers only that in that lovely mind of hers he has loved Joyce when she was without a penny, and that he is now what he has always seemed to her, the one man that could make Joyce happy. Yes, it is true, says Dysart. He has given up that unsuccessful gaiety now, and has grown very grave. There is even a slight tremble in his voice. He comes up to Mrs. Monkton and takes both her hands. She has given herself to me. You are really glad. You are not angry about it. I know I am not good enough for her, but... Here Joyce gives way to a little outburst of mirth that is rather tremulous, and coming away from the unfriendly wall that has not been of the least use to her, brings herself somewhat shamefacedly into the only light the room receives through the western window. The twilight at all events is kind to her. It is difficult to see her face. I really can't stay here, says she, and listen to my own praises being sung. And besides, turning to Felix a lovely but embarrassed face, Barbara will not regard it as you do. She will, on the contrary, say you are a great deal too good for me, and that I ought to be pillorized for all the trouble I have given, though not being able to make up my own mind for so long a time. Indeed, I shall say nothing but that you are the dearest girl in the world, and that I am delighted things have turned out so well. I always said it would be like this, cries Barbara exultantly, who certainly never had said it, and had always indeed been distinctly doubtful about it. Is Mr. Monkton in? Says Felix, in a way that leads Monkton's wife to imagine that if she should chance to say he was out, the news would be hailed with rapture. Oh, never mind him, says she, beaming upon the happy but awkward couple before her. I'll tell him all about it. He will be just as glad as I am. There, go away, you two. You will find the small parlour empty, and I dare say you had a great deal to say to each other still. Of course you will dine with us, Felix, and give Freddie an opportunity of saying something ridiculous to you. Thank you, says Dysart warmly. I suppose I can write a line to my cousin explaining matters. Of course, Joyce. Take some writing things into the small parlour and call for a lamp as you go. She is smiling at Joyce as she speaks, and now, going up to her, kisses her impulsively. Joyce returns the caress with fever. It is natural that she should never have felt the sweetness, the content of Barbara so entirely as she does now, when her heart is open and full of ecstasy, and when sympathy seems so necessary. Darling Barbara! But then she must love Felix now just as much as she loves her. She rather electrifies Barbara and Felix by saying anxiously to the former, "Kiss Felix too." It is impossible not to laugh. Mrs. Monkton gives way to immediate and unrestrained mirth, and Dysart follows suit. "It is a command," says he, and Barbara thereupon kisses him affectionately. "Well, now I have got a brother at last," says she. It is indeed her first knowledge of one, for that poor suicide in Nice had never been anything to her, nor to any one else in the world for the matter of that, except a great trouble. "There, go," says she, "I think I hear Freddy coming." Then fly. They both feel that further explanations are beyond them just at present, and as for Barbara, she is quite determined that no one but she shall let Freddy into the all-important secret. She is now fully convinced in her own mind that she always had special prescience of this affair, and the devouring desire we all have to say, "I told you how 'twould be," to our unfortunate fellow-travellers through this vale of tears, whether the cause for the hateful reminder be for weal or woe, is strong upon her now. She goes to the window, and seeing Monkton some way off, flings up the sash and waves to him in a frenzied fashion to come to her at once. There is something that almost approaches tragedy in her air and gesture. Monkton hastens to obey. "Now what do you think has happened?" cries she, when he has vaulted the window sill and is standing beside her, somewhat breathless and distinctly uneasy. Nothing short of an accident to the children could, in his opinion, have warranted so vehement a call. Yet Barbara, as he examines her features carefully, seems all joyous excitement. After a short contemplation of her beaming face he tells himself that he was an ass to give up that pilgrimage of his to the lower field, where he had been going to inspect a newborn calf. "The skies are all right," says he, with an upward glance at them through the window, "and you hadn't another uncle, had you?" "Oh, Freddy," says she, very justly disguised. "Well, my good child, what then? I am all curiosity." "Guess," said she, too happy to be able to give him the round scolding he deserves. "Oh, if it's a riddle," says he, "you might remember I am only a little one, and unequal to the great things of life." "Ah, but Freddy, I've something delicious to tell you. There, sit down. You look quite queer, while "No wonder I do," he says at last rather wrathfully. "To judge by your wild gesticulations at the window just now, anyone might have imagined that the house was on fire and a hostile race tearing en masse into the backyard, and now, why, it appears you are quite pleased about something or another. Really, such disappointments are enough to age any man, or make him look queer. That was the word you used, I think." "Listen," says she, seating herself beside him, and flipping her arm around his neck. "Joyce is going to marry Felix, after all. There!" Still with her arm holding him, she leans back a little to mark the effect of this astounding disclosure. End of chapter 53. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 54 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford, Chapter 54. Well said, that was laid on with a trowel. Gratiano speaks an infinite deal of nothing, more than any man in all Venice. After all, indeed, you may well say that, says Mr. Monckton, with indignation. If those two idiots meant matrimony all along, why on earth didn't they do it all before? See what a lot of time they've lost, and what a disgraceful amount of trouble they have given all around. Yes, yes, of course, but then you see, Freddy, it takes some time to make up one's mind about such an important matter as that. It didn't take you long, says Mr. Monckton most unwisely. It took me a great deal longer than it took you, replies his wife with dignity. You have always said that it was the very first day you ever saw me, and I'm sure it took me quite a week. This lucid speech she delivers with some severity. More shame for you, says Monckton promptly. Well, never mind, says she, too happy and too engrossed with her news to enjoy even a skirmish with her husband. Isn't it all charming, Freddy? It certainly turned out very well, all things considered. I think it is the happiest thing, and when two people who love each other are quite young— Really, my dear, you are too flattering, says Monckton, considering the grey hairs that are beginning to make themselves so unpleasantly at home in my head. I, at all events, can hardly lay claim to extreme youth. Good gracious, I'm not talking of us, I'm talking of them, cries she, giving him a shake. Wake up, Freddy. Bring your mind to bear upon this big news of mine, and you will see how enchanting it is. Don't you think Felix has behaved beautifully? So faithful, so constant, and against such terrible odds? You know Joyce is a little difficult sometimes. Now hasn't he been perfect all through? He is a genuine hero of romance, says Mr. Monckton with conviction. None of your cheap articles. A regular bona fide 13th century knight. The country ought to contribute its stray halfpennies and buy him a pedestal and put him on the top of it, whether he likes it or not. Once there Simon Stylites would be forgotten in half an hour. Was there ever before heard of such a heroic case? Did ever yet living men have the prowess to propose to the girl he loved? It is an entirely new departure, and should be noticed. It is quite unique. Don't be horrid, says his wife. You know exactly what I mean, that it is a delightful ending to what promised to be a miserable muddle, and he is so charming, isn't he now, Freddy? Is he? asked Mr. Monckton, regarding her with a thoughtful eye. You can see for yourself, he is so satisfactory. I always said he was the very husband for Joyce. He is so kind, so earnest, so sweet in every way. Nearly as sweet as I am, eh? There is a stern inquiry now in his regard. Poof! I knew what you are, of course. Who would if I didn't? But really, Freddy, don't you think he will make her an ideal husband? So open, so frank, so free from everything. Everything. Oh, well, everything, you know. I don't, says Monckton uncompromisingly. Well, everything hateful, I mean. Oh, she is a lucky girl. Nearly as lucky as her sister, says Monckton, growing momentarily more stern in his determination to uphold his own cause. Don't be absurd, I declare, with a little burst of amusement. When they told me about it, I never felt so happy in my life. Except when you married me. He throws quite a tragical expression into his face, that is, however, lost upon her. Of course, with her present fortune, she might have made what the world would call a more distinguished match. But his family are unexceptionable, and he has some money, not much, I know, but still, some, and even if he hadn't, she has now enough for both. After all, with noble disregard of the necessities of life, what is money? Dross, mere dross, says Mr. Monkton, and he is just the sort of man not to give a thought to it. He couldn't, my dear. Heroes of romance are quite above all that sort of thing. Well, he is certainly, says Mrs. Monkton, a little offended. You may go on pretending as much as you like, Freddy, but I know you think about him just as I do. He is exactly the sort of charming character to make Joyce happy. Nearly as happy as I have made you, says her husband severely. Dear me, Freddy, I really do wish you would try and forget yourself for one moment. I might be able to do that, my dear, if I were quite sure that you were not forgetting me too. Oh, as to that, I declare you are a perfect baby. You love teasing. Well, there then. The there represents a kiss, and Mr. Monkton, having graciously accepted this tribute to his charms, condescends to come down from his mental elevation and discuss the new engagement with considerable affability. Once, indeed, there is a dangerous lapse back into his old style, but this time there seems to be occasion for it. When they stood there stammering and stuttering, Freddy, and looking so awfully silly, I declare I was so glad about it that I actually kissed him. What? Says Mr. Monkton. And you have lived to tell the tale? You have, therefore, lived too long. Perfidious women prepare for death. I declare I think you'd have done it, says Barbara eloquently, whereupon, having reconsidered her speech, they both give way to mirth. I'll try it when I see him, says Monkton. Even a hero of romance couldn't object to a chaste salute from me. He is coming to dinner. I hope when you do see him, Freddy, anxiously this, you will be very sober about it. Barbara, you know I never get, that is, not before dinner at all events. Well, but you promise me now, you will be very serious about it. They are taking it seriously, and they won't like it if you persist in treating it as a jest. I'll be a perfect judge. I know what that means, indignantly, that you are going to be as frivolous as possible. My dear girl, if the bench could only hear you, well there, then, yes, really, I'll be everything of the most desirable, a regular funeral mute, and, saying she is still offended, I am glad about it. Barbara, honestly, I think him as a good fellow as I know, and Joyce another. Having convinced her of his good faith in the matter, and argued with her on every single point, and so far perjured himself as to remember perfectly and accurately the very day and hour on which, 3 months ago, she had said that she knew Joyce preferred Felix to Beauclerk, he is forgiven, and presently allowed to depart in peace with another there, even warmer than the first. But it is unquestionable that she keeps a severe eye on him all through dinner, and so forbids any trifling with the sacred topic. It would have put the poor things out so, she had said to herself, and indeed it must be confessed that the lovers are very shy and uncomfortable, and that conversation drifts a good deal, and is only carried on irregularly by fits and starts. But later, when Felix has unburdened his mind to Monkton during the quarter of an hour over their wine, when Barbara has been compelled, in fear and trembling, to leave Freddy to his own devices, things grow more genial, and the extreme happiness that dwells in the lovers' hearts is given full play. There is even a delightful half-hour granted them upon the balcony, Barbara having, like the good angel she is, declared that the night is almost warm enough for June. End of chapter 54. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 55 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 55. Great discontents there are, and many murmurs. There is a kind of mournful eloquence in thy dumb grief. Lady Baltimore, too, had been very pleased by the news when Felix told her next morning of his good luck. In all her own great unhappiness, she had still a kindly word and thought for her cousin and his fiancée. "One of the nicest girls," she says, pressing his hands warmly. "I often think, indeed, the nicest girl I know. You are fortunate, Felix, but," very kindly, "she is fortunate too." "Oh no, the luck is all on my side," says he. "It will be a blow to Norman," she says presently. "I think not," with an irrepressible touch of scorn. "There is Miss Maliphant." "You mean that he can decline upon her? Of course I quite understand that you do not like him," says she with a quick sigh. "But believe me, any heart he has was really given to Joyce. Well, he must devote himself to ambition now. Miss Maliphant can help him to that." "No, no, that is all knocked on the head. It appears, this is in strictest confidence, Felix, but it appears he asked her to marry him last evening, and she refused." Felix turns to her as if to give utterance to some vehement words, and then checks himself. After all, why add to her unhappiness? Why tell her of that cur's baseness? Her own brother, too. It would be but another grief to her. To think he should have gone from her to Miss Maliphant. What a pitiful creature, beneath contempt! Well, if his pride survives those two downfalls, both in one day, it must be made of leather. It does Felix good to think of how Miss Maliphant must have worded her refusal. She is not famous for grace of speech. He must have had a real bad time of it. Of course, Joyce had told him of her interview with the sturdy heiress. "Ah, she refused?" says he, hardly knowing what to say. "Yes, and not very graciously, I'm afraid. He gave me the mere fact of the refusal, no more, and only that because he had to give a reason for his abrupt departure. You know he is going this evening." "No, I did not know it. Of course, under the circumstances—" "Yes, he could hardly stay here. Margaret came to me and said she would go, but I would not allow that. After all, every woman has a right to refuse or accept as she will." "True." His heart gives an exultant leap as he remembers how his love had willed. I only wish she had not hurt him in the refusal, but I could see he was wounded. He was not in his usual careless spirits. He struck me as being a little, well, you know, a little—" she hesitates. "Out of temper?" suggests Felix involuntarily. "Well, yes. Disappointment takes that course with some people. After all, it might have been worse if she had set his heart on Joyce and been refused." "Much worse," says Felix, his eyes on the ground. "She would have been a severe loss." Severe indeed. By this time Felix is beginning to feel like an advanced hypocrite. "As for Margaret Maliphant, I'm afraid he was more concerned about the loss of her bonds and scrips than of herself. It is a terrible world, Felix, when all is told," says she, suddenly crossing her beautiful long white hands over her knees and leaning toward him. There is a touch of misery so sharp in her voice that he starts as he looks at her. It is a momentary fit of emotion, however, and passes before he dare comment on it. With a heart nigh to breaking, she still retains her composure and talks calmly to Felix, and lets him talk to her, as though the fact that she is soon to lose forever the man who once had gained her heart, that fatal once that means for always, in spite of everything that has come and gone, is as little or nothing to her. Seeing her sitting there, strangely pale indeed, but so collected, it would be impossible to guess at the tempest of passion and grief and terror that reigns within her breast. Women are not so strong to bear as men, and therefore in the world's storms suffer most. "It is a lovely world," says he smiling, thinking of Joyce, and then, remembering her sad lot, his smile fades. "One might make, perhaps, a bad world better," he says, stammering. "Ah, teach me how," says she, with a melancholy glance. "There is such a thing as forgiveness." "Forgive him!" blurts he out in a frightened sort of way. He is horrified at himself, at his own temerity. A second later, and rises to his feet as if to meet the indignation he has certainly courted. But to his surprise, no such indignation betrays itself. "Is that your advice?" says she, still with the thin white hands clasped over the knee, and the earnest gaze on him. "Well, well, well." Her eyes droop. She seems to be thinking, and he, gazing at her, refrains from speech with his heart sad with pity. Presently she lifts her head and looks at him. "There, go back to your love," she says, with a glance that thrills him. "Tell her from me that if you had the whole world to choose from, I shall still select her as your wife. I like her. I love her. There, go." She seems to grow all at once very tired. Are those tears that are rising in her eyes? She holds out to him her hand. Felix, taking it, holds it closely for a moment, and presently, as if moved to do it, he stoops and presses a warm kiss upon it. She is so unhappy, and so kind, and so true. God deliver her out of her sorrow. End of chapter 55. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 56 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 56. I would that I were low laid in my grave? She is still sitting silent, lost in thought, after Felix's departure, when the door opens once again to admit her husband. His hands are full of papers. "Are you at liberty?" says he. "Have you a moment? These," pointing to the papers, "want signing. Can you give your attention to them now?" "What are they?" asks she, rising. "Mere law papers." "You need not look so terrified." His tone is bitter. "There are certain matters that must be arranged before my departure, matters that concern your welfare and the boys." Here, laying the papers upon the davenport and spreading them out, "you sign your name here." "But," recoiling, "what is it? What does it all mean?" "It is not your death warrant, I assure you," says he, with a sneer. "Come, sign." Seeing her still hesitate, he turns upon her savagely. Who shall say what hidden storms of grief and regret lie within that burst of anger? "Do you want your son to live and die a poor man?" says he. "Come, there is yourself to be considered, too. Once I am out of your way, you will be able to begin life again with a light heart, and this," tapping the paper heavily, "will enable you to do it. I make over to you and the boy everything, at least as nearly everything as will enable me to live." "It should be the other way," says she. "Take everything, and leave us enough on which to live." "Why?" says he, facing round, something in her voice that resembles remorse striking him. "We shall have each other," says she, faintly. "Having happily got rid of such useless lumber as the father and husband, well, you will be the happier so," rejoins he with a laugh that hurts him more than it hurts her, though she cannot know that. "Two is company, you know, according to the good old proverb, three trumpery. You and he will get on very well without me, no doubt." "It is your arrangement," says she. "If that thought is a salve to your conscience, pray think so," rejoins he. "It isn't worth an argument. We are only wasting time." He hands her the pen. She takes it mechanically, but makes no use of it. "You will at least tell me where you are going?" says she. "Certainly I should, if only I knew myself. To America first, but that is a big direction, and I am afraid the tenderest love letter would not reach me through it. When your friends ask you, say I have gone to the North Pole. It is as likely a destination as another." "But not to know!" says she, lifting her dark eyes to his, dark eyes that seemed to glow like fire in her white face. "That would be terrible. It is unfair. You should think. Her voice grows husky and uncertain. She stops abruptly. "Don't be uneasy about that," says he. "I shall take care that my death, when it occurs, is made known to you as soon as possible. Your mind shall be relieved on that score with as little delay as I can manage. The welcome news shall be conveyed to you by a swift messenger." She flings the pen upon the writing table and turns away. "Insult me to the last if you will," says she, "but consider your son. He loves you. He will desire news of you from time to time. It is impossible that you can put him out of your life as you have put me." "It appears you can be unjust to the last," says he, flinging her own accusation back at her. "Have I put you out of my life?" "Ah, was I ever in it?" says she. "But you will write?" "No, not a line. Once for all I break with you. Should my death occur you will hear of it, and I have arranged so, that now and after that event you and the boy will have your positions clearly defined. That is all you can possibly require of me. Even if you marry again, your jointure will be secured to you." "Baltimore!" exclaims she, turning upon him passionately. She seems to struggle with herself for words. Has marriage proved so sweet a thing, cries she presently, that I should care to try it again? There, go, I shall sign none of these things. She makes a disdainful gesture towards the loose papers lying on the table, and moves angrily away. You have your son to consider. Your son will inherit the title and property without these papers. There are complications, however, that perhaps you do not understand. Let them lie there. I shall sign nothing. In that case you will probably find yourself immersed in troubles of the meaner kinds after my departure. The child cannot inherit until after my death, and I do not care, says she sullenly. Go if you will. I refuse to benefit by it. What a stubborn woman you are, cries he, in great wrath. You have for years declined to acknowledge me as your husband. You have by your manner almost commanded my absence from your side. Yet now, when I bring you the joyful news that in a short time you'll actually be rid of me, you throw 1,000 difficulties in my path. Is it that you desire to keep me near you for the purposes of torture? It is too late for that. You have gone a trifle too far. The hope you have so clearly expressed in many ways that time would take me out of your path is at last about to be fulfilled. I have had no such hope. No? You can look me in the face and say that? Saintly lips never lie. However, do they? Well, I am sick of this life. You are not. I have borne a good deal from you, as I told you before. I bear no more. I give in. Fate has been too strong for me. You have created your own fate. You are my fate. You are inexorable. There is no reason why I should stay. Here the sound of running, childish, pattering footsteps can be heard outside the door, and a merry little shout of laughter. The door is suddenly burst open in rather unconventional style, and Bertie rushes into the room, a fox terrier at his heels. The dog is evidently quite as much up to the game as the boy, and both race tempestuously up the room and precipitate themselves against Lady Baltimore's skirts. Round and round her the chase continues, until the boy, bursting away from his mother, dashes toward his father, the terrier after him. There isn't so much scope for talent in a pair of trousers as in a mass of dainty petticoats, and presently Bertie grows tired, flings himself down upon the ground, and lets the dog tumble over him there. The joust is virtually at an end. Lady Baltimore, who has stood immovable during the attack upon her, always with that cold, white, beautiful look upon her face, now points to the stricken child lying panting, laughing, and playing with the dog at his father's feet. There is a reason, says she, almost inaudibly. Baltimore shakes his head. I have thought all that out. It is not enough, says he. Bertie, says his mother, turning to the child, do you know this, that your father is going to leave you? Going? Says the boy vaguely, forgetting the dog for a moment, and glancing upward. Where? Away forever. Where? Says the boy again. He rises to his feet now, and looks anxiously at his father, then smiles and flings himself into his arms. Oh, no, says he in a little soft, happy, sure sort of way. Forever, forever, repeats Isabel in a curious monotone. Take me up, says the child, tugging at his father's arms. What does mamma mean? Where are you going? To America to shoot bears, returns Baltimore with an embarrassed laugh. How near to tears it is. Real, live bears? Yes. Take me with you, says the child excitedly. And leave mamma? Or she'll come too, says Bertie confidently. She'll come where I go. Where he would go, the child. But would she go where the father went? Baltimore's brow darkens. I am afraid it is out of the question, he says, putting Bertie back again upon the carpet, where the fox terrier is barking furiously, and jumping up and down in a frenzied fashion, as if desirous of devouring the child's legs. The bears might eat you. When you are big and strong, you will come back for me? Cries Bertie eagerly. Perhaps. He will not, breaks in Lady Baltimore violently. He will come back no more. When he goes, you will never see him again. He has said so. He is going forever. These last two terrible words seem to have sunk into her soul. She cannot cease from repeating them. Let the boy alone, says Baltimore angrily. The child is looking from one parent to the other. He seems puzzled, expectant, but scarcely unhappy. Childhood can grasp a great deal, but not all. The more unhappy the childhood, the more it can understand of the sudden and larger waves of life. But children delicately brought up and clothed in love from their cradle find it hard to realize that an end to their happiness can ever come. Tell me, papa, says he at last in a vague, sweet little way. What is there to tell, replies the father, with a most meagre laugh, except that I saw Beecher bringing in some fresh oranges half an hour ago. Perhaps he hasn't eaten them all yet. If you were to go ask for one, I'll find him, cries Bertie, brightly, forgetting everything but the present moment. Come, Trixie, come, to his dog. You shall have some, too. You see there won't be much trouble with him, says Baltimore, when the boy has run out of the room in pursuit of oranges. It will take him a day, perhaps, and after that he will be quite your own. If you won't sign these papers today, you will perhaps tomorrow. I had better go and tell Hansard that you would like to have a little time to look them over. He walks quickly down the room, opens the door, and closes it after him. End of chapter 56. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, B.C. Chapter 57 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, B.C. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 57. This is that happy morn, that day, long-wished day, of all my life so dark, if cruel stars have not my ruin sworn, and fates my hopes betray, which purely white deserves, an everlasting diamond should it mark. He has not, however, gone 3 yards down the corridor when the door is again opened, and Lady Baltimore's voice calls after him. Baltimore! Her tone is sharp, high, agonized, the tone of one strung to the highest pitch of despair. It startles him. He turns to look at her. She is standing, framed in by the doorway, and one hand is grasping the woodwork with a hold so firm that the knuckles are showing white. With the other hand she beckons him to approach her. He obeys her. He is even so frightened at the strange grey look in her face that he draws her bodily into the room again, shutting the door with a pressure of the hand he can best spare. "What is it?" says he, looking down at her. She has managed to so far overcome the faintness that has been threatening her as to shake him off and stand free, leaning against a chair behind her. "Don't go," says she hoarsely. It is impossible to misunderstand her meaning. It has nothing whatever to do with his interview with the lawyer waiting so patiently down below, but with the final wandering of his into regions unknown. She is as white as death. "How is this, Isabel?" asks he. He is as white as she is now. "Do you know what you are saying? This is a moment of excitement. You do not comprehend what your words mean." "Stay, stay for his sake." "Is that all?" says he, eyes searching hers. "For mine, then." The words seem to scorch her. She covers her face with her hands and stands before him, stricken dumb, miserable, confessed. "For yours!" He goes closer to her, and ventures to take her hand. It is cold, cold as death. His is burning. "You have given a reason for my staying, indeed," says he. "But what is the meaning of it?" "This!" cried she, throwing up her head, and showing him her shamed and grief-stricken face. "I am a coward. In spite of everything, I would not have you go so far." "I see, I understand," he sighs heavily. "And yet that story was a foul lie. It is all that stands between us, Isabel. Is it not so? But you will not believe." There is a long silence, during which neither of them stirs. They seem wrapped in thought, in silence, he still holding her hand. "If it was a lie," says she at last, breaking the quiet around them by an effort, "would you so far forgive my distrust of you as to be holding my hand like this?" "Yes. What is there I would not forgive you?" says he. "And it was a lie." "Cyril," cries she in great agitation, "take care. It is a last moment. Do you dare to tell me that still? Supposing your story to be true, and mine, that woman's, false, how would it be between us then?" "As it was in the first good old time when we were married." "You could forgive the wrong I have done you all these years, supposing—" "Everything, all." "Ah!" This sound seems crushed out of her. She steps backward, and a dry sob breaks from her. "What is it?" asks he quickly. "Oh, that I could, that I dared, believe," says she. "You would have proofs," says he coldly, resigning her hand. "My word is not enough. You might love me did I prove worthy. Your love is not strong enough to endure the pang of distrust. Was ever real love so poor a thing as that? However, you shall have them." "What?" asks she, raising her head. "The proofs you desire," responds he, icily. "That woman, your friend, the immaculate one, died the day before yesterday." "What? You never heard? And you and she—" "She was nothing to me," says Lady Baltimore. "Nothing since the day she reviled me, and yet," with a most joyous laugh, "for the sake of a woman you cared so little about, that even her death has not caused you pang, you severed the tie that should have been the closest to you on earth. Well, she is dead. Heaven rest her soul, as the peasants say. She wrote me a letter on her bed of death." "Yes?" eagerly. "You still doubt?" says he, with a stern glance at her. "So be it. You shall see the letter, though how will you satisfy you? For you can always gratify your desire for suspicion by regarding it as a forgery. The woman herself is dead, so, of course, there is no one to contradict. Do think this all out," says he, with a contemptuous laugh, "before you commit yourself to a fresh belief in me. You see I give you every chance. To such a veritable Thomas in petticoats every road should be laid upon open. Now, tauntingly, will you wait here whilst I bring the proof? He is gazing at her in a heartbroken sort of way. Is it the end? Is it all really over? There had been a faint flicker of the dying candle, a tiny glare, and now for all time is it to be darkness? As for her, ever since he had let her hand go, she had stood with bent head looking at it. He had taken it, he had let it go. There seemed to be a promise of heaven. Was it a false one? She is silent, and Baltimore, who had hoped for one word of trust, of belief, makes a gesture of despair. "I will bring you the letter," he says, moving toward the door. When he does bring it, when she had read it and satisfied herself of the loyalty so long doubted, where, he asks himself, will they two be then? Further apart than ever? He has forgiven a great deal, much more than this, and yet, strange human nature, he knows if he once leaves the room and her presence now, he will never return again. The letter she will see, but him, never. The door is open. He has almost crossed the threshold. Once again her voice recalls him. Once again he looks back. She is holding out her arms to him. "Cyril, Cyril," she cried, "I believe you." She staggers toward him. Mercifully the fountain of her tears breaks loose. She flings herself into his willing arms and sobs out a whole world of grief upon his bosom. It is a cruel moment, yet one fraught with joy as keen as sorrow, a fire of anguish out of which both emerge purified, calmed, gladdened. End of chapter 57. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 58 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 58. Lo, the winter is past, the rain is over and gone. The flowers appear on the earth. The time of the singing of the birds has come. The vague suspicion of rain that had filled their thoughts at breakfast has proved idle. The sun is shining forth again with redoubled vigor, as if laughing their silly doubts to scorn. Never was there so fair a day. One can almost see the plants growing in the garden, and from every bough the nesting birds are singing loud songs of joy. The meadows are showing a lovely green, and in the glades and uplands the daffodils that come before the swallow dares are uprearing their lovely heads. The air is full of sweet scents and sounds, and Joyce, jumping down from the drawing-room window that lies close to the ground, looks gladly round her. Perhaps it is not so much the beauty of the scene as the warmth of happiness in her own heart that brings a smile to her lips and eyes. He will be here today. Involuntarily she raises one hand and looks at the ring that encircles her engaged finger. A charming ring of pearls and sapphires. It evidently brings her happy thoughts, as, after gazing at it for a moment or two, she stoops and presses her lips eagerly to it. It is his first gift, though not his last, and therefore the most precious. What girl does not like receiving a present from her lover? The least mercenary woman on earth must feel a glow at her heart and a fonder recognition of her sweetheart's worth when he lays a love-offering at her feet. Joyce, after her one act of devotion to her sweetheart, runs down the garden path and toward the summer house. She is not expecting Dysart until the day has well grown into its afternoon, but, book in hand, she has escaped from all possible visitors to spend a quiet hour in the old earwiggy shanty at the end of the garden, sure of finding herself safe there from interruptions. The sequel proves the futility of all human belief. Inside the summer house, book in hand likewise, sits Mr. Brown, a picture of studious virtue. Miss Kavanagh, seeing him, stops dead short. So great is her surprise, and Mr. Brown, raising his eyes as if with difficulty from the book on his knee, surveys her with a calmly judicial eye. Not here, my child," quotes he incorrectly. "You had better try next door." "Try for what?" demands she indignantly. "For whom, you mean." "No, I don't," with increasing anger. "Jocelyn," says Mr. Brown severely, "when one forsakes the path of truth, it is only to tread in." "Nonsense!" says Miss Kavanagh irreverently. "As you will," says he meekly, "but I assure you he is not here." "I could have told you that," says she, colouring, however, very warmly. "I must say, Dicky, you are the most ingenious, stupid person I have ever met in my life." "To shine in even the smallest line in life is to achieve something," says Mr. Brown, complacently. "And so you knew he wouldn't be here just now?" This is uttered in an insinuating tone. Miss Kavanagh feels she has made a false move. To give Dicky an inch is, indeed, to give him an ell. "He? Who?" says she weakly. "Don't descend to dissimulation, Jocelyn," advises he severely. "It is the surest road to ruin. If one is to believe the good old copybooks, by he, you see I scorn subterfuge, I mean Dysart, the person to whom in a mistaken moment you have affianced yourself, as though I were not ready at any time to espouse you." "I am not going to be espoused," says Miss Kavanagh, half laughing. "No, I quite understood. I won't have that word," petulantly. "It sounds like something out of the Dark Ages." "So does he," says Mr. Brown. "Felix, you know, so Latin, quite like one of the old monks. I shouldn't wonder if he has turned out a—" "I wish you wouldn't tease me, Dicky," says she. "You think you are amusing, you know, but I think you are one of the rudest people I ever met. I wish you would let me alone." "Ah, why didn't you leave me alone?" with a slight that would have set a furnace ablaze. However, with a noble determination to overcome his grief, "let the past lie. You want to go and meet Dysart, isn't that it? And I'll go and meet him with you. Could self-sacrifice further go? Jim along Josie. No doubt he is at the upper gate by this time, flying on the wings of love." "He is not," says Joyce, "and I wish once for all, Dicky, that you wouldn't call me Josie. Jocelyn is bad enough, but Josie, and I'm not going to Jim anywhere, and certainly," with strong determination, "not with you." She looks at him with sudden curiosity. "What brought you here today?" asks she, most inhospitably, it must be confessed. "What brings me here every day? To see the unkindest girl in the world." "She doesn't live here," says Miss Kavanagh. "Dicky," changing her tone suddenly and looking at him with earnest eyes, What is this I hear about Lady Baltimore and her husband? Be sensible now, do and tell me. They're going abroad together, with Bertie. They've made it up, says he, growing as sensible as ever she can desire. It is such a complete make-up all around, they didn't even ask me to go with them. However, I'm determined to join them at Nice on their return from Egypt. Too much billing and cooing is bad for people. I'm so glad, says Joyce, her eyes filling with tears. They are two such dear people, and if it hadn't been for Lady... By the by, where is Lady Swansdown? Russia, I think. Well, I liked her too, says Joyce with a sigh. But she wasn't good for Baltimore, was she? Not very, says Mr. Brown dryly. I should say, on the whole, that she disagreed with him. Tonics are sometimes dangerous. I'm so delighted, says Joyce, still thinking of Lady Baltimore. Well, smiling at him, why don't you go in and see Barbara? I have seen her, talked with her a long while, and bid her adieu. I was on my way back to court, having failed my hope of seeing you, when I found this delightful nest of earwigs, and I thought I'd stay and confabulate with them a while in default of better companions. Poor Dicky, says she, come with me then, and I'll talk to you for half an hour. Too late, says he, looking at his watch. There is only one thing left me now to say to you, and that is goodbye. Why this mad haste? Aha! Can I have my little secrets too? Says he. A whisper in your ear, leaning towards her. No, thank you, says she, waving him off with determination. I remember your last whisper. There, if you can't say, Dicky, good-bye indeed. I am going for a walk. She turns away resolutely, leaving Mr. Brown to sink back upon the seat and continue reading, or else go and meet the secret he spoke of. I say, calls he, running after her, you may as well see me as far as the gate anyway. It is evident the book at least has lost its charms. Miss Kavanagh, not being stony-hearted so far, gives in as to walk with him to a side gate, and having finally bidden him adieu, goes back to the summer house he has quitted, and opening her book, prepares to enjoy herself. Vain preparation! It is plain that the fates are against her to-day. She is no sooner seated, with her book of poetry open on her knee, than a little flying form turns the corner, and Tommy precipitates himself upon her. What are you doing? Asks he. End of chapter 58. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. Chapter 59 of April's Lady. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, BC. April's Lady by Margaret Wolfe Hungerford. Chapter 59. Lips are so like flowers, I might snatch at those, redder than the rose leaves, sweeter than the rose. Love is a great master. I am reading, says she. Can't you see that? Read to me then, says Tommy, scrambling up on the bench beside her and snuggling himself under her arm. I love to hear people. Well, not this, at all events, says Miss Kavanagh, placing the dainty copy of the Muses of Mayfair she has been reading on the rustic table in front of her. Why not that one? What is it? Asked Tommy, staring at the book. Nothing you would like. Horrid stuff, only poetry. What's poetry? Oh, nonsense, Tommy. You know very well what poetry is. Your hymns are poetry. This she considers will put an end to all desire for the book in question. It is a clever and skilful move, but it fails signally. There is silence for a moment while Tommy cogitates, and then, "Are those hymns?" demands he, pointing at the discarded volume. "No, not exactly." This is scarcely disingenuous, and Miss Kavanagh has the grace to blush a little. She is the further discomposed in that she becomes aware presently that Tommy sees through her perfectly. "Well, what are they?" asks he. "Oh, well, just poetry, you know." "I don't," says Tommy flatly, who is nothing if not painfully truthful. "Let me hear them." He pauses here and regards her with searching eye. "They," with careful forethought, "aren't lessons, are they?" "No, they are not lessons," says his aunt, laughing, "but you wouldn't like them for all that. If you are athirst for literature, get me one of your own books, and I will read Jack the Giant Killer to you." "I am sick of them," says Tommy, most ungratefully, that tremendous hero having filled up many an idle hour of his during his short lifetime. "No," nestling close to her, "go on with your poetry one. You would hate it. It's worse than Jack," says she. "Let me hear it," says Tommy persistently. "Well," says Miss Kavanagh with a sigh, "if you will have it, at least don't interrupt." She has tried very hard to get rid of him, but having failed in so signal a fashion, she gives herself up with an admirable resignation to the inevitable. "What would I do that for?" asked Tommy rather indignantly. "I don't know, I'm sure, but I thought I'd warn you," says she, wisely precautious. "Now sit down there," pointing to the seat beside her, "and when you feel you've had enough of it, say so at once." "That would be interrupting," says Tommy the conscientious. "Well, I give you leave to interrupt so far," says Joyce, glad to leave him a loophole that may ensure his departure before Felix comes. "But no further, mind that." "Oh, I'm minding," says Tommy impatiently. "Go on. Why don't you begin?" Miss Kavanagh, taking up her book once more, opens it at random. All its contents are sweetmeats of the prettiest, so she is not driven to a choice. She commences to read in a firm, soft voice. "The wind and the beam love the rose, and the roses love one, for who reeks the—" "What's that?" says Tommy. "What's what? You aren't reading it right, are you?" "I certainly am. Why?" "I don't believe a beam of wood could love anything," says Tommy. "It's too heavy." "It doesn't mean a beam of wood, doesn't it?" staring up in her face. "What it means then, the beam that is in thine own eye?" He is now examining her own eye with great interest. As usual, Tommy is strong in Bible lore. "I have no beams in my eye, I hope," says Joyce, laughing, "and at all events it doesn't mean that either. The poet who wrote this means a sunbeam." "Well, why couldn't he say so?" says Tommy gruffly. "I really think you had better bring me one of your own books," said Joyce. "I told you this would—" "No," obstinately. "I like this. It sounds so nice and smoothly. Go on," says Tommy, giving her a nudge. Joyce, with a sigh, reopens the volume, and gives herself up for lost. To argue with Tommy has always been known to fatigue, and nothing else. One never gains anything by it. "Well, do be quiet now and listen," says she, protesting faintly. I'm listening like anything, says Tommy, and indeed now, at last it seems if he were. So silent does he grow as his aunt reads on, you might have heard a mouse squeak. But for the low, soft tones of Joyce, no smallest sound break the sweet silence of the day. Miss Kavanagh is beginning to feel distinctly flattered. If one can captivate the flitting fancies of a child by one's eloquent rendering of a charming verse, what may one not aspire to? There must be something in her style if it can reduce a boy of 7 to such a state of ecstatic attention, considering the subject is hardly such one as would suit his tender years. But Tommy was always thoughtful beyond his age. A clear, clever little fellow, so appreciative, far, far beyond the average. The mild sweetness of the spring evening and her own thoughts are broken in upon this instant by the dear clever little fellow. He has just got your waist now, says he, with an air of wild if subdued excitement. He? Who? What? Shrieks Joyce, springing to her feet. A long acquaintance with Tommy has taught her to dread the worst. Oh, there, of course you knocked him down, and I did want to see how high he would go. I was tickling his tail to make him hurry up, says Tommy, in an aggrieved tone. I can't see him anywhere now, peering about on the ground at her feet. Oh, what is it, Tommy? Do speak, cries Joyce, in a frenzy of fear and disgust. 'Twas an earwig, says Tommy, lifting a seraphic face to hers. And such a big one. He was racing up your dress most beautifully, and now you've upset him. Poor thing. I don't believe he'll ever find his way back to you again. I shall hope not, indeed, says Miss Kavanagh hastily. He began at the very end of your frock, goes on Tommy, still searching diligently on the ground, as if to find the earwig with a view to restoring it to its lost hunting ground. And it wriggled up so nicely. I don't know where he is now, sorrowfully, unless, with a sudden brightening of his expressive face, he is up your petticoats. Tommy! What a horrid bad boy you are, cries poor Joyce, wildly. She gives a frantic shake to the petticoats in question. Find him at once, sir. He must be somewhere down there. I shan't have an instant's peace until I know where he is. I cannot see him anywhere, says Tommy. Maybe you'll feel him presently, and then we'll know. He isn't on your leg now, is he? Oh, don't, cries Joyce, who looks as if she is going to cry. She gives herself another vigorous shake, and stands away from the spot where Tommy evidently thinks the nauseous beast in question may be, with her petticoats held carefully up in both hands. Oh, Tommy, darling, do find him. He can't be up my petticoats, can he? He can. There's nothing they can't do, says Tommy, who is plainly revelling in the storm he has raised. Her open fright is beer and skittles to him. Why did you stir? He was as good as gold until then, and there wasn't anything to be afraid of. I was watching him. When he got to your ear, I'd have told you. I wouldn't like him to make you deaf, but I wanted to see if he would go to your ear. But you spoiled my fun, and now, where is he? asked Tommy with an awful suggestion in his tone. On the grass, perhaps, says Joyce, miserably, looking round her everywhere, even on her shoulder. I don't feel him anywhere. Sometimes they stay quite a long time, and then they crawl, says Tommy, the most horrible anticipation in his tone. Really, Tommy, cries his aunt indignantly, I do think you are the most abominable boy I ever met in my life. There, Go away. I certainly shan't read another line to you, either now or ever." "What is the matter?" asks a voice at this moment that sounds close to her elbow. She turns round with a start. "It is you, Felix," says she, colouring warmly. Oh, it's nothing, only Tommy, and he said I had an earwig on me, and I was just a little unnerved, you know." "And no wonder," says her lover, with delightful sympathy. "I can't bear that sort of wild animal myself. Tommy, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. When you saw him, why didn't you rise up and slay the destroyer of your aunt's peace? There, run away into the hall. You will find on one of the tables a box of chocolate. I told Mabel it was there. Perhaps she—" Like an arrow from the bow, Tommy departs. "He has evidently his doubts of Mabel," says Joyce, laughing rather nervously. "She is still a little shy with Phoenix. He doesn't trust her." "No." He has seated himself and now draws her down beside him. "You were reading?" he says. "Yes." "To Tommy?" "Yes," laughing more naturally this time. "Tommy is a more learned person than one would have supposed. Is this the sort of thing he likes?" pointing to Nydia's exquisite song. "I'm afraid not, though he would insist upon me reading it. The earwig was evidently far more engrossing as a subject than either the wind or the rose. And yet," he has his arm around her now, and is reading the poem over her shoulder. "You are my rose," says he softly, "and you, do you love but one?" She makes a little mute gesture that might signify anything or nothing to the uninitiated, but to him his instinct with a most happy meaning. "Am I the one, darling?" She makes the same little silent movement again, but this time she adds to it by casting a swift glance upward at him from under her lowered lids. "Make me sure of it," entreated he almost in a whisper. He leans over her, lower still, with a little tremulous laugh, dangerously akin to tears. She raises her soft palm to his cheek, and tries to press him from her, but he holds her fast. "Make me sure," he says again. There is a last faint hesitation on her part, and then their lips meet. "I have doubted always a little, ever since that night down by the river," says he. "But now—" "Oh, no, you must not doubt me again," says she with tears in her eyes. End of chapter 59. Recording by Linda Marie Nielsen, Vancouver, B.C. End of April's Lady, a novel by Mrs. Hungerford.